Republican National Convention. Just a short while ago, Republican vice presidential nominee Paul Ryan was on the convention floor, preparing for what is unarguably the biggest speech of his political life. Speaking of big shows, we have another big show of our own for you tonight. Representative Ryan's marquee speech in just a few hours, and before that, John McCain, Condoleezza Rice, foreign policy. To talk about it all, I'm joined now by Carolyn Ryan, Metro editor of the New York Times. Carolyn, thanks for joining us.
Sure thing.
Now you covered Mitt Romney, both in the '94 race against Senator Ted Kennedy when he went for a Senate spot, eventually unsuccessfully, and in his governorship in Massachusetts.
I followed him a long time.
And you spent all day here talking to delegates.
Yeah.
What did they think of the two big speeches last night, Ann Romney and Governor Chris Christie?
Well, it was really interesting because, remember, this has been a very unusual start to a national convention. People were scattered, stranded in airports, stuck. They had a very difficult time getting here, and when they finally got here on Monday, nothing happened.
Right.
So people were really looking for some kind of emotional moment to come together, and Ann Romney's speech really served as that emotionally resonant moment. I have to tell you, the number of watched him in New Jersey, it almost felt much more tailored to a New Jersey audience, which of course is a Democratic state with a lot of independents, and potentially to a future audience than that Hall audience.
Interesting. So maybe Governor Christie looking out for his own future, maybe in 4 years or 8 years from now.
It's interesting because so much of the commentary so far about Governor Christie has been, did he eclipse Ann? And quite different from what you'll hear from the other speakers.
Excellent. Well, speaking of the other speakers, you spoke earlier today with delegates. We had a camera crew with you. Let's hear what those other delegates had to say about what they're looking forward to. I think it has a lot to do with Paul Ryan tonight.
I'm Carolyn Ryan. We're here at the Hyatt Regency this morning, where the Mississippi and Wisconsin delegations are staying. The talk today is all about Paul Ryan.
Paul Ryan, what I can say about him is he's always been extremely accessible to everyone. He'll come to a Lincoln Day dinner. He'll travel all around the state. He will talk to you about anything.
I thought it was a great pick. I mean, Paul Ryan, better than anybody else in the party right now, can articulate the stark contrast between where we're headed economically and physically and where we need to be going.
He's very knowledgeable on the budget, and I think that's what we need. We need somebody to go in there and clean the mess up.
With Ryan speaking tonight, what are you looking to hear from him?
Well, I'm really excited to hear more about his plan for the country. We've got a lot of people talking about all of the things that are wrong with America and things that are not going well, and they're saying we don't have a plan.
Well, I'm looking for the fiscal conservatism.
Democrats, of course, are attacking Ryan on Medicare, his plan for Medicare. How directly do you think he needs to address that?
I think he needs to address that because I believe that was a plan that he put out a while back.
He's got to fix Medicare. I'm on Medicare. They've got to fix Medicare. We're not going to have Medicare for anyone.
You're clearly of a younger generation. Does he speak to something that's about the future?
He does. It gives us hope because right now the debt clock on the wall, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger every day. And we just don't feel like there's any change or any hope for the future.
I think we need the younger people in. I think people that will have the guts to go after, to make changes that we need.
Tell me what kind of reception you think Ryan will get when he comes onto the stage.
I think he's going to blow the roof off the top of the building.
Really interesting responses there. Kind of two issues. Number one, the debt. Paul Ryan's real asset on that. Number two, Medicare. This issue that a lot of delegates, even inside this hall, that's got to be worrisome for the Republicans, concerned about what the Ryan plan means for their Medicare. How does that cut in the political election?
Well, here's the thing. To what degree is this speech that Ryan is going to give going to have to be reassuring about Medicare? I mean, clearly when you look at the polls, to older voters, but every age group that has been polled on this is opposed to a voucher system of Medicare. He's associated with that plan. People seem to know that he's the author of such a plan, so it feels like he's got to address it directly. But just to your point about the delegates, everything that people say is lacking about Mitt Romney, that there's not a passion, that there's not a human connection, that there's not an excitement. I have to tell you, talking to those delegates, there is a sense that Paul Ryan is one of us. He came from the ranks of conservative activists. He, in some ways, sometimes it feels like Mitt Romney is a nominee that has been imposed upon this convention
by the establishment.
By the establishment. And Paul Ryan, by contrast, sort of came from the movement.
There was this really interesting moment last night when Romney came into the hall, which, usually it kind of does come into the hall before accepting before his acceptance speech. But last night, Romney came in after Ann Romney's speech, and the crowd did not erupt in the kind of amazing, boisterous roar that we're used to at these political conventions. And it was kind of the audience, after Ann's speech, which they loved, the audience kind of fell flat. Is there a concern that Paul Ryan may actually outdo Mitt Romney when it comes to enthusiasm from their crowd?
There's definitely a possibility. Now, here's what the Romney people are saying. We just wanted last night to be sort of a taste of Mitt, that he would come in and not overshadow Ann. But when you think about it, a couple of things. One, Ann has just given the biggest speech of her life. She had to be nervous. There was no kind of embrace or, big reassuring hug from Mitt. It was a very kind of muted thing. Another thing, when you look back on past conventions, there are always a few emotional moments that you remember. And that had the potential, I think, to be one of those, and yet somehow it fell very flat. So part of this is just the reality that they've had to squish 4 days into 3, and the choreography is not all that elegant, but it did feel like a missed opportunity.
Speaking of enthusiasm and some gaps in enthusiasm, we're going to go back to the floor right now where they're playing a Ron Paul video, and there's a great deal of enthusiasm being displayed in the hall. Okay, we're not going to go back to the floor, but we are.
And he said, no, I'm not going to be elected. He said, you have to be like Santa Claus. You have to give them something. He says, I don't want to give them something or bring home the bacon. He said, I want to give them their freedom.
It's been a consistent theme since his very first election that government's grown too large, and as government grows larger, your freedoms grow smaller. And he's fought this through the years.
When I first got to the House, I thought Ron Paul was nuts. He was out there talking about the Federal Reserve, the monetary system, but more and more I found myself voting with him.
He's been talking about these things since the early 1970s, and he hasn't wavered, he hasn't buckled, even when he's had to stand alone.
I've always put politicians in two categories. They're either here to make a point or they're here to make a difference. Ron Paul is the only one I know who made a difference by making a point.
We need lower taxes, less regulations, and we need to free up the market.
He's been the absolute fiscal hawk, one of the most fiscally conservative members in the history of the Congress.
I can guarantee you we wouldn't have a $16 trillion debt if we had 435 Ron Pauls in Congress.
The more I think about him over the years, the more inspiring it is of what he's done. And not being afraid of anything, but willing to stand for what he thought was right. Ron Paul was Tea Party before there was a Tea Party.
If you want honesty and integrity, look to Ron Paul, and that's based on his faith and based on his belief in the Constitution.
He's willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do because his convictions are so deep.
As long as we live beyond our means, we are destined to live beneath our means.
So there we're getting just a little dip from the floor there, just a little taste of the enthusiasm this crowd still bears for that candidate who didn't make it over the line. One of the constituencies the Mitt Romney campaign has got to energize are these Paulistas, which we're hearing behind us. Another constituency that maybe they don't have to win, but they have to certainly narrow the gap with President Obama, women. Right. What do you think they have to do to narrow that gender gap that we keep hearing about?
Well, there are a bunch of things that they are trying to do. They're trying to showcase women. When Mitt Romney ran for governor in Massachusetts, back in 2002, he was going to be running against a woman, and he very shrewdly chose a woman as running mate. And there was some anticipation that he would at least strongly consider a woman for the ticket this time. Obviously, that didn't happen. They have a much more traditional ticket. And then they had this controversy involving Todd Akin in the Missouri Senate race kind of explode on them. And basically, as you've seen, the Democrats are going to exploit any kind of wedge issue they can to drive independent women to the Democrats and to make them nervous about this ticket. So Ann was an effort to do that. They're trying to bring out people like Nikki Haley, Condi Rice, and show that the Republican Party supports strong women. You even saw, this is a more organic thing, but when they did the roll call of the states, there are a number of women who stood up and that they were, proudly announcing the states' tallies. But it's been a really tricky issue for them.
Well, Thanks, Carolyn. We wanted to learn more about what issues were on the minds of women in and around the convention. So we sent our national correspondent, Susan Salney, to find out.
On the first day of the Republican National Convention, women were front and center with a key speech by Ann Romney, the wife of the Republican nominee.
It's the moms of this nation, single, married, widowed, who really hold this country together. You know it's true, don't you?
In the wake of controversial comments about rape and abortion, the Republican Party wants to fight the perception that the GOP is out of touch with women and the issues that are important to them.
I think that the Republican Party gets that brand completely unfairly. Democrats think it's much easier to win over women voters if they talk about these social issues. And I think that's a risky gamble for them because I so firmly believe that this will be an election about the economy.
Both moderate and conservative women counter that the real war on women impacts their pocketbooks.
I think women care about jobs and the economy and the deficit. We don't want to leave our grandchildren with a lot of debt, and I think Paul Ryan holds the key to tackling our fiscal problems.
Far away from the official happenings on the convention floor, there are various events around town meant to appeal to women and showcase female candidates. But even at these places, no one wants to talk about specifically women's issues or social issues because they're so divisive.
My parents are naturally conservative because they just wanted the opportunity to work and take care of their family and make decisions and not have government rule their lives.
At a breakfast for the Utah delegation, congressional candidate Mia Love gave a speech that purposefully ignored social issues.
I haven't concentrated on the social issues as much as I have on the economic issues. That's what's most important to my district. That's what I believe we need to focus on in this country. Fiscal discipline, our debt and deficit spending issues. We need to focus on work. Utah's tightening their belt. We want Washington to do the same. We're working hard to live within our means. We want Washington to do the same.
But the one place where social and women's issues are mentioned is the official Republican Party platform that takes a hard line on things like abortion and gay marriage. For the first time, for instance, the platform includes language that says abortion may endanger the health of women. Though their personal views may differ, even those Republican women who agree believe that talk of a gender gap is purely a political ploy.
It's a distraction, and I know a lot of women and men agree with me. It's the economy. The economy and jobs, that's the most important thing right now, not any talk about abortion.
Susan Salney joins me now live. Susan, thanks for being here. Were you surprised at how adamantly some of these delegates were that women don't care so much about social issues but more about economic ones?
I absolutely was surprised, Marcus. Especially if you think back to the primary season. These are issues that absolutely engulfed the primaries. Gay marriage, access to contraception, insurance coverage of contraception. These are issues that motivated a lot of people to get to the polls, particularly women. So now that they're taking a back seat did make me question what was going on. It seems to be strategic. It seems as though a lot of women in the party, particularly those in elected office, are speaking with one voice to counter Democratic claims that there is a war on women. That's to the extent that they acknowledge a gender gap at all.
Right.
You know?
And do they not acknowledge the gender gap?
Some people I talked to said that there was no gender gap in the Republican Party, that it's a very woman-friendly place, family-friendly, but that's in spite of a lot of evidence to the contrary. So I brought up the fact that, you know, in some polls of all voters, the candidates are neck and neck, but when you pull out women voters, Obama's ahead by a sizable margin,
Sure.
10 points or so. And so I suggested to them, I asked them, well, how would you bridge that gap? And they said the answer is to focus on fiscal issues, the economy, jobs, pocketbook issues, over everything else.
The Republican women and the Republican delegates here, there is, it seems to me, a greater diversity, a greater difference of opinion than the platform lays forth for many of these social issues.
It's true.
How do moderate Republican women, moderate delegates, how do they square that circle? How do they rationalize the platform?
A lot of them told me they just weren't paying attention to the platform, that platforms come and go, and that they were concentrating on fiscal issues, their personal beliefs, and were unconcerned about what the platform said.
interesting because you had a great piece, one of the great pieces during this campaign coverage, a front-page article about young Republicans. And not just young Republicans, but young Republican activists, the people who are out there working for the party. And on many of these social issues, particularly the issue of same-sex marriage, these young Republicans told you that they disagree with the party.
That's right. They did.
What does it mean for the party?
I think they, at this point, want to get Mitt Romney elected, right? And they know that some of these issues appeal to their base, but they need to make a broader appeal than just their base. They're trying to move out and make the broadest appeal possible. These issues are divisive, and they might not make the difference for him if they concentrate on things like abortion rights. Or
did anyone point out, and this has been a problem early in the primaries, lots of Mitt Romney's opponents brought this out, the fact that Mitt Romney, when he was governor of Massachusetts, when he was running the state, when he was running for Senate in Massachusetts, he had a different view on these social issues. He was much more of a moderate. Does anyone care about that? Do they kind of wish he were still that guy because he'd have a better chance of winning independent and swing voters?
I think they don't like to engage in wishful thinking or, retrospectives.
Right. As old Donald Rumsfeld might say, you fight with the candidate you got.
Right. So they're trying to stay in the here and now, and they think the way forward is fiscal issues, focus on the economy. That's how they're going to bring women into the fold.
Well, excellent. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
Speaking of women, again, let's go outside for a second. Carolyn.
We have
Sorry about that.
List here,
we're going to go outside now to my colleague Carolyn Ryan, who's standing by. Okay, we're not ready with that yet. Susan, speaking about women, we're going to be talking soon to one of the leaders in this party who's fighting to get more women in elected office.
Right.
Do you think the Republicans have a chance of that with this message that they're trying to send out to America? Can you actually get more women elected to office?
I think they're certainly going to try, right? They think that this is a moment of some vulnerability for the Democrats, the economy being the way it is and that it's been this way for so long. A lot of women have begun to be frustrated with their personal finances and how hard it is to put dinner on the table, particularly single moms, and there are so many in the country, and those women cast ballots. So I think it's an issue that could have some traction for them.
And it's something that Ann Romney talked about last night. Okay, I'm told that we are ready now to go outside, so we're going to toss to my colleague Carolyn Ryan, who's now outside, standing by with Sandra Mortham, who's the former Florida Secretary of State and the chairwoman of the group Maggie's List. Take it away, Carolyn.
Thank you, Marcus. Tell me about Maggie's List. I heard recently that only 278 women in the entire history of the United States Congress have served, and of course there are more men serving currently in federal office than that number. So what are you going to do about that?
Well, that's exactly why a group of women got together and decided it's high time that we develop a list like Maggie's List, and we said we want conservative women running for office and we want them to win, and that takes money. So this federal PAC is concentrating on fiscal conservatism, less government, better national security, and more personal responsibility. And we've had a phenomenal track record in 2010, and we hope that 2012 is the same.
Now, the group that everyone compares you to, of course, is Emily's List. How are you doing in terms of raising money compared to Emily's List, which has been much more established in national races?
Well, absolutely. Emily's List has been around for 35 years, and I hope that we can gain traction much quicker. We're just now really getting on the scene, and it's going very well, but we can always take more members and more donors.
And you talk about fiscal conservatism, personal responsibility. Where do you stand on the social issues, and do your candidates have to align in any particular way?
Well, I think that liberals have believed that women are with them all the time. And the truth is that women look at a broad spectrum of issues. And today, more than ever before, the economics are really important in every household. And we've got husbands without jobs. We have children that have lost jobs. Women are the breadwinners in families. And so we believe that women are smart. They're very smart, and they're looking at everything. And I believe that they will go with our conservative women candidates in this election season.
And why does Barack Obama lead Mitt Romney among women so dramatically right now?
Well, I believe it's message. It's all about message. And I believe that we have a great opportunity. Ann Romney did a wonderful job in conveying the fact that he is respectful of women, that he admires women. And I think he's going to embrace our candidates on Maggie's list, and they'll be part of his dream team.
Thanks so much. Back to you, Marcus.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. So, Susan, in that interview, we were hearing from the head of Maggie's list, once again, this refrain that women don't care so much about social issues, liberals tend to think they do, but the economic issues and bread and butter issues matter a great deal.
Well, I think a lot of women are feeling sandwiched right now financially between the responsibilities of taking care of their children and also taking care of elderly parents. And so it's an issue of real resonance, particularly for women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s of age to run the office.
And younger women, how do they fall in these issues? Obviously, I mean, the unemployment rate is high for younger Americans right now.
It could be a motivating factor for them, too. And people are starting to think about retirement earlier and earlier in life. So I think there's some real potential there. We'll have to watch and see.
And out on the campaign trail, I wonder if, have you seen particular messages from either campaign that resonated more with women, or were women kind of, especially independent women, non-Democratic, non-Republican women, do they feel caught in the middle between these two candidates still? I'm unsure.
I have heard that there's a lot of uncertainty about who has the better plan for the economy. A lot of women have recognized that the economy is their issue, but they're unclear about which direction to go to try to solve their own personal problems, which candidate would be best for them. And it's surprising at this point, given how strikingly different the platforms are, but they still see a lot of confusion even this late in the game.
Now you're going to still be covering the campaign once these conventions are over, heading back out there to America. Any idea of where you'll be looking, what you'll be looking for, which
I'm going to be all over. I'll just be traveling the country speaking to voters. Lots of swing states. I'll be spending more time here in Florida. Plan to go to Wisconsin, New Mexico, California, everywhere.
Excellent. Susan, thanks so much for joining us. And now we're going over to the Media Center, where Rick Burke is standing by with campaign finance reporter Nick Confessore. Rick?
Thanks, Marcus. Now, Nick, you've spent most of this campaign year writing about campaign finance, and you've written a lot about how the parties act on their own and the outside groups are totally separate from the parties and the campaign. But here in Tampa, you've been following around fundraisers, and it seems like everyone's glommed together. There's no distinction between the super PACs and the campaign fundraisers, and it's all one big collection of money.
That's right.
People.
It's basically one big party. I mean, the main thing that they can't do or coordinate on is spending money. But this convention is all about raising money and celebrating and potentially raising more money in the future by having donor briefings. That's all stuff they can do pretty legally without running afoul of federal rules, and everyone's doing it very, very aggressively. Donors are better informed about what the rules are and less wary of showing up at these briefings or even hosting some of the briefings. The actual officials, people in Congress, are happy to show up at forums and headline these briefings. It is basically legal, but it was something that it was a little bit people were kind of wary of it before and didn't want to get as involved.
But it's really striking because I remember in conventions past, there was such a distinct line, bright red line between the outside groups and the campaigns, and no one wanted to be seen even talking or in the same room. And now you said those rules are sort of out the window.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to operatives with super PACs who are staying at the same hotels and going to the same parties and receptions in the same skyboxes as elected officials, as donors, and I'm sure everyone is trying pretty hard to not run afoul of the coordination rules. But that still leaves a lot of leeway for kind of joint effort and a kind of joint celebration and acknowledgement of the fact that they are all basically pushing toward the same goal, which is to elect Mitt Romney and elect Republicans to Congress again.
Now, you went to one of these groups' private breakfast this morning in St. Petersburg. Tell us about that. And that was a Restore Our Future, which is past Romney supporters running that PAC.
Right. Restore Our Future was a very large PAC that helped Mitt Romney win the primary and the nomination. It was founded by 3 of his former aides, all of whom are here in Tampa, people who worked on his 2008 presidential campaign. And what they had was a briefing held at the same resort where the Romney campaign is housing all of its biggest donors. pretty convenient.
Right.
So they show up, they can wander in, they all have their convention badges and name tags. They wandered into breakfast, they had a nice fruit spread, some coffee, some tea, some melons, and sat down to hear three guys who used to work for Romney, I should say, explain how they're going to raise $100 million and spend it to elect Romney without coordinating formally with the campaign.
Now, how did you get into this breakfast? Were you invited?
Oh, I stood outside the breakfast.
Oh, I see. I see.
But there's a lot you can learn by standing outside something and talking to people as they come after it with Carl Forty, who's the political director of Restore Our Future, and had the same job for the Romney campaign in 2008.
Now, what are the legal distinctions between any collusion or any interaction between the two? Could these people get in
trouble? Say they are surprised at how little enforcement the FEC is doing, the Federal Election Commission.
Right.
There was a time when if they knew that there was a meeting between that featured both elected officials and theoretically independent groups, and things were said, that might perk their ears up. You might see them subpoenaing people or asking for information or doing interviews. We don't see any of that now. It's really an agency that seems to be divided against itself.
Are they?
Well, they're pretty nice. At the end of the day, they're all being held at hotels.
Right.
And if you've been to one hotel conference room, you've been to any hotel conference room. But as you can look, if you look at the donor packages that the campaign offers, its different tiers of bundlers and fundraisers and donors, you see that the best accommodations, the most luxurious accommodations, and the ones that are closest to the convention center and most convenient are saved for those who raise and give the most.
But it's still the chicken dinner circuit. So.
It's still basically that, yeah.
Right. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. And now a look at a Florida community far from the convention hall with our video journalist Adam Ellick, who spent the day or several days learning why this community is disconnected from much of the political world and the economic world.
All right, Dan, you got the next item in your right hand. Plastic dinnerware.
This is Adam Ellick reporting from Dixie County in northwest Florida. It's Saturday night, and the hottest place in tiny Old Town is the Dixieland Auction House.
I think that's because this is the way people are buying now. They're buying used, repossessed things and stuff like that. They can't buy new. People can't afford to live.
Florida's economy has been hit particularly hard in the recession. As a result, the State Auctioneer Association says the past 3 years have been the best in decades, as people turn to used items and fight for every dollar.
Give me a $3 start. 3 to go, but to get 3, 2 to go, but to get 3 to go, but to get 2 to go, but to get 3. $2. Thank you, ma'am.
The auction house owners are Tony Colley, a retired termite inspector, and his wife of 50 years, Glenda.
Because everybody calls me the #1 bitch around here, and I said, well, that's okay. I know I am. They ain't gonna fit you. Not with that big gut you got.
$2 bid.
Originally from Tampa, they moved 3 hours north to retire here. And in a swing state like Florida, they have one rule.
If you want to talk politics, please leave. Do it somewhere else. Don't do it here.
That rule came after a fist fight nearly broke out several years ago.
And he made a bad comment about Hillary, and we had an uproar that night.
The Obama and Romney teams are combing the state for every possible vote, but 25% of Floridians won't vote, including Tony and Glenda. They stopped voting after the 2000 election, which was decided in Florida. The Colleys think it's unfair that Al Gore received more popular votes, but still lost the election.
Your husband said if it was a popular vote, he would probably come out.
Yeah, we would go back to voting if that's the way they did it, but they don't.
When it comes to voting, it's often said that Florida's a microcosm for America.
What's your story?
10 times around the world, I guess.
There are lifetime Floridians, New Englanders, Midwesterners, and lots of New Yorkers.
I was up on the Upper West Side, in our Beacon Theater.
What are you doing here?
I'm retired.
The city here is called Old Town, and yes, there are lots of old folks here. They came seeking paradise, but today's Old Town is down on its luck. Unemployment's nearly 14% in this rural county, and pop-up consignment shops have overtaken proper stores.
The waiter told me that 3 restaurants closed down in the past year.
Yes.
Probably the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Last year, Pastor Cecil Highsmith started a small food program at his church. Now it feeds 3 meals a day to 50 families.
When they pay the light bill and they pay their utilities and expenses, they have very little money for food.
This is Wedgwood.
The Collies may not vote, but most of their customers do. So the couple made an exception to their no politics rule from me. And it didn't take long to hear some strong opinions.
I was always Democrat till Obama got in there. I didn't vote for him because I'm very prejudiced. I don't like black men. So
many of the customers here are struggling small business owners.
We haven't worked in
We're small business
5
owners.
months.
And they're deeply divided on how much time the president deserves to fix the economy.
I still respect him very much.
You need more than 8 years.
Yeah, you need more than
It took a long time.
It took
coming
many years for it to happen. It's been happening
to get
for
here,
a long
but
time.
it's going to take a long time to clean it up.
We did both vote Republican, and we'll do it again.
But other small business owners say their patience for the president has run out.
Our best years of business were 2006 and 7, and going into 2008. And our worst year has been 2010 and 11. So as far as the progress goes, we're in trouble. The economy in this county is in trouble.
As the nation focuses in on the election, the Collies will turn the other way. After 50 years of marriage, their only vote is for each other.
50 years, and I would do it again if I had to.
You never know what people are going to tell you when you interview them on the street like that. But here I am now joined by our correspondent, Mark Leibovich. And Mark, you write about kind of the lighter side or more the personal side of politicians, and you're trolling this convention, following around politicians and trying to find things about them and their character that other reporters miss. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, I think the first job of a reporter, looking for these things is just to show up as much as possible, be there, stake the subject out, follow him as far as you can follow him, and things serendipitously will fall into your lap. I mean, for instance, I followed Chris Christie out to his car after his walkthrough yesterday, and I was able actually to get a discussion with him on what he was going to eat before his big speech. I mean, it wasn't terribly interesting or revealing, but again, I mean, I think it's very important to play by the rules, but also to push the rules and to be where people might not expect you to be.
So it's just a matter of like stalking these people so you get more details.
Stalking,
right?
Yeah, stalking's a bit. It's a loaded word,
Right.
but I would say that good reporters engage in a kind of sanctioned stalking that is not, it's not stalking per se, certainly by any legal definition. But I mean, again, it's being pushy, it's being present, and just sort of having your eyes trained.
Now you have a magazine piece running this Sunday in the Times Magazine about the Joyless campaign. It's on our website today, and in that piece, I was struck that you described a certain Fox TV reporter as having an oval-shaped face.
I think oval head. Yeah, I described Carl Cameron of Fox News as being the oval-headed reporter. I didn't think it was that prejudiced. I didn't think it was that elaborate a description, but I think truthfully he does have an oval shape.
But how do you know when you're not going too far? Like, do you have editors? I hope that
I do have editors.
Should they have stopped you there?
I don't think so.
And what does that add to the journalism?
Hopefully a visual image. I mean, I think, it'll help readers see what Carl Cameron looks like if they can't immediately picture him. I don't think that was any great sort of, great turn of imagery. But, I mean, again, I think a good editor allows you to take risks as a writer, but also knows how to rein you in and protect you from yourself. And thankfully, I've had a lot of editors over the years who have protected me from myself and probably saved a few firings here and there.
But do people fear you? Like, if you were writing about me, I would, my face might not be, my head might not be oval, but there are other things you could say, and I'd be really nervous about that.
No, look, I mean, people ask me that all the time. I mean, why does anyone talk to me? Why do people, let me sort of come into their worlds? I mean, part of it is I'm a really nice guy, and I'm really charming, and I talk my way in. But I think also, I mean, look, I do try to be fair. I think, you have to balance incisive observation, whether it's physical observation or verbal tick observation, with genuine pathos and a real heart for what their experience is, which in politics is very inhuman. I mean, I cannot imagine what a politician goes through, and I always I never really lose sight of that.
Now, you spent a lot of time just up close with a lot of politicians who are here this week.
Right.
Can I get your quick impressions of some of them? Newt Gingrich.
Newt Gingrich is a whole lot of laughs. I mean, he has a lot of fun. I mean, I think in Iowa, I was struck by how late he and Callista would stay out at the hotel bar, and he just really loved the give and take of politics. He would talk for hours off the record about the day's events, about politics, and so forth.
One more, Ann Romney last night.
Ann Romney was nervous, which I liked. I liked that she sort of humanized herself that way. I sort of belong in the camp that says that she could have told more stories, was much more declarative. It was more like, trust me, it was a little plaintive rather than illustrative.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Rick.
Appreciate it. That's all from me right now. I'll be back in the next hour with Deputy Washington Bureau Chief Carl Hulse and illustrator Christoph Niemann. Back to you, Marcus.
Thanks so much, Rick. I'm joined now by Sarah Longwell of Young Conservatives for Freedom to Marry to talk about marriage equality. Sarah, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder if you could start off by telling us what is Young Conservatives for Freedom to Marry?
Well, I think it's all right there in the name, but Freedom to Marry is a group that's been around for a long time, that's been advocating marriage equality. And once President Obama, about 3 months ago, came out in favor of same-sex marriage, his personal position, changed, he evolved, and now he was in favor of it. The group had the idea that, look, we really need to start talking to conservatives and Republicans. That's where this conversation really needs to start happening. In New York State, where we recently won on marriage equality, it was because there were 4 Republicans who stood up for marriage equality. There were 8 Republicans who stood up for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The New Hampshire legislature that didn't repeal marriage rights in that state was predominantly Republican. And so this conversation now has to happen conservative to conservative, Republican to Republican. And so these Young Conservatives for Freedom to Marry are really talking to other conservatives about the fact that, hey, look, the demographics in our party are shifting. Young conservatives, people under the age of 44, believe in the freedom to marry. 46% of self-identified conservatives and Republicans believe in marriage equality. And so the Republicans are eventually going to have to change their position on these issues. And we're here to help them do that and move it along faster.
Now, you brought along an interesting ad. If you
sure did.
Show that to our viewers. And what this ad says, it's kind of shocking for some folks, perhaps. The institution of marriage, it's a quote at the top, is the foundation of civil society. Its success as an institution will determine our success as a nation. And that's a quote from Tony Perkins, head of the Family Research Council. I'm going to use the most objective term I could. Someone who is really opposed to same-sex rights for same-sex Americans, equal rights for same-sex loving Americans.
Sure.
Rights for gay and lesbian people.
That's right.
And doesn't like gay and lesbian people.
Yep.
And yet that quote's about the institution of marriage. And underneath it, and it's an ad taken out by Log Cabin Republicans and Young Conservatives for Freedom to Marry, underneath that Tony Perkins quote, it says, "We agree."
That's right.
For a lesbian or gay American like yourself to say, "We agree with Tony Perkins," is kind of extraordinary.
Well, that's the twist of the ad, and that's the really cool part. What we're saying is, you know what, Tony Perkins, we agree with you that marriage is extremely important. We agree with you that the institution is fundamental to our society, and that is why that's not an argument for excluding gay people. That's an argument for including gay people. If marriage is such an important institution and it's going to help all individuals to be better at everything they do, to have loving partners who care for them so that they're not the responsibility of the government, people like Tony Perkins should be demanding that gay people get married.
But that's not what the platform of this party and this candidate says.
Unfortunately, no. Well, unfortunately, Tony Perkins was allowed to write the GOP platform, and it's really interesting. During the platform discussions, this didn't get reported widely, but there was a vigorous debate during the platform discussions where there were Republican delegates who said, "I think we ought to add civil unions to the platform. I think we ought to strike the DOMA language." Now, those people lost, but there was that debate. It is changing within the party, and I think that this vitriolic language that was put forward by Tony Perkins is really kind of a death rattle for people like himself who are quickly fading within the party. I think it's going to be the last time they're going to be able to do something like this, because this is the language of somebody who may have won this particular battle, but he is losing the war.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to listen in now to Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who is actually lighting up this crowd.
The man we know as Ronald Reagan, whose sunny optimism and charisma shined so brightly that it cured the malaise of the late 70s. A confidence that beamed so broadly that it pulled us through a serious recession. And a faith that tugged so happily at the hearts of all that a generation of Democrats became Republicans. The American dream is that any among us could become the next Thomas Edison, the next Henry Ford, the next Ronald Reagan. But to lead us forward away from this looming debt crisis, it will take someone who believes in America's greatness, who believes in and can articulate the American dream, someone who has created jobs, someone who understands and appreciates what makes America great, someone who will lead our party and our nation forward. I believe that someone is our nominee, Governor Mitt Romney.
That's Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, again lighting up this audience. One issue that somewhat surprisingly, perhaps, hasn't been on the front burner from the podium of this is the ongoing war in Afghanistan. Tampa has a significant military presence with Central Command, aka CENTCOM, nearby. We sat down with two veterans who hold opposite political views in the upcoming election.
My name is Nick Moringas. I am 25 years old. I am going to vote for Mitt Romney because he is the lesser of two evils, in my opinion. I agree more with what Mitt has to say than I do with what Barack Obama has to say.
My name is Javier Santonzio. I would describe myself as a liberal, a moderate, but a liberal. President Obama has taken many steps to ensure our veterans are taken care of, not only with disability benefits, but with the updates to the GI Bill, so we can obtain an education, we can retrain ourselves, and with the current push to put veterans to work.
I spent 4.5 years in the military. I was an airborne infantryman, and I served a year in Iraq. And now I'm going to school, starting to work towards my degree, so I can become an air traffic controller someday, work for the FAA.
I served in the United States Marine Corps on active duty, and I joined the Kansas Army National Guard. My last deployment came in November of 2005. I deployed to Iraq. Now I'm recently graduated from law school. I'm starting my own veterans law practice, and I'm also pursuing an advanced law degree in elder law.
My view on Barack Obama is that he's failing the nation as a leader because he won't do the things necessary to push his agenda and get things done. He's too focused on his Obamacare and what he feels is going to fix the economy, which may not be the right answer.
I think Mitt Romney, obviously his strengths are his business acumen. He's shown that he's able to go into places and use his means to make a profit, but there's more to America, there's more to being the president than the bottom line.
The soldiers I served with more or less shared my views, and you will find that I think most members of the military tend to be very conservative.
One of the big criticisms that I received was that liberals are weak when it comes to national security, and that's just not true. A lot of my veteran friends have discussed the absence of a military veteran as candidate for president or vice president. And I think that there is a value in being a veteran and running for office and holding an office, but I don't think that it is a requirement to be a good leader for our country.
I'm joined now by Tom Tarantino, who is the Chief Policy Officer of the nonpartisan Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Tom, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Marcus.
Earlier today, candidate Governor Romney was in Indianapolis, and he's talked a bit about veterans, and he said that this president, President Obama, had failed American veterans. Is he right?
The reality is this is a really complex issue. You have to look beyond the politics and the talking points and actually go into the policy of it. The reality is the VA is severely broken, and it's been severely broken for decades. And in fact, the problems at the VA are much more serious than any 1, 2, or 3 administrations can actually handle. So the VA has pretty serious failures. Despite the fact that the VA has been very aggressive in trying to modernize itself over the last 4 years, we still have a 65% backlog rate in the disability. We still have mental health wait times where a veteran who is in crisis has to wait 50 days to see mental health care.
What changes does your group, which is a group of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, therefore young vets, what do they want to see policy-wise?
Well, our members told us that they're looking for 5 things, and these are the 5 things that we are not hearing from either candidate. We're looking to defend the GI Bill against fraud, waste, and abuse from predatory for-profit schools. We're looking to make sure that veterans leave the service and can find jobs. We want to make sure that the abnormally high rate of suicide in the active duty military and the veterans population can go down. We're looking at building a 21st century VA, something that is modern and that responds to the needs of 21st century veterans. And we're looking to improve health care for women veterans in the VA.
And so far you'd argue that neither campaign is answering those changes, those needed changes.
No, and President Obama, during his term as president, has addressed a lot of these issues. Governor Romney, while he was governor of Massachusetts, actually has a very good record on dealing with this as commander-in-chief of the Massachusetts National Guard. But these issues have been totally absent thus far in the campaign. In fact, Governor Romney's speech today was the first time any of these issues even approached being addressed in the context of the campaign. You know, veterans are a serious voting bloc. 300,000 veterans in Virginia and Florida, 60,000 veterans in Ohio. 90% of the members of my organization, IAVA, are registered to vote, and we have the potential to swing an election. So we're looking for candidates.
Especially in places like Virginia.
Absolutely. We're looking for candidates that address our needs and not talk to us as if they're making a bumper sticker.
Are you surprised so far that the war in Afghanistan, foreign policy in general, have not been issues in the campaign, and neither campaign has really spoken to?
Well, it's not surprising understanding the politics of it. You know, we have serious problems at home. We have an incredibly high unemployment rate. We have a severe economic crisis at home. So that's what the country's going to be focused on. But for guys who are applying for the job to be the commander-in-chief, it is their responsibility to make sure that these issues are in front of the American public. Because if America forgets about this, if America forgets that we have an entire generation of veterans that need care, once the war in Afghanistan ends, people are going to forget. And as the budget crisis gets worse in Congress, a lot of these programs, like the GI Bill, like veterans health care, that should be untouchable, are going to start looking touchable if the American people don't make them a priority.
And we'll see if tonight maybe some of those issues are addressed with Condi Rice, John McCain taking the stage. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We asked earlier today for people's thoughts on the RNC's mystery speaker, who hasn't been announced yet for a primetime spot on Thursday night. Well, did we ever get some results? Viewers tweeted tons of names, everyone from Clint Eastwood to Tim Tebow to Donald Trump to a holographic Ronald Reagan. Search the hashtag RNC Mystery for more. Anyway, that's all from me for tonight. The Opinion Desk takes over now for a few minutes, and then my colleague Megan Lieberman will be in this chair to anchor the next hour. I'm Marcus Mabry. Thanks for watching the New York Times.
Hi, we're here today with a special guest, Mo Rocca, humorist and correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning. Mo has just finished a feature-length documentary on the favorite subject of ours, electoral dysfunction, and we also persuaded him to do 4 op docs for the New York Times. We're going to look at the first of them now, and then Mo and I will chat about it a bit.
For a nation that prides itself on its democracy, America hasn't made the act of voting particularly easy.
We have 13,000 election jurisdictions in this country that run elections 13,000 different ways. Election officials get to do different things from one place to the next. Some voters vote on different kinds of ballots from others. And so we have different rules about who can register and who can't from state to state. And it's really not one America when it comes to voting. There are cracks in our democracy. In fact, the way that elections are run is dysfunctional.
Electoral dysfunction. Where's the pill for this affliction?
I'm Mo Rocca, American. And as an American, I'm proud that I have the right to vote. Or do I? For answers, I consulted the Constitution.
This is the wrong copy, I think.
No, this is the Constitution.
This is the Constitution.
Yeah. A close reading of the Constitution didn't turn up anything about the right to vote.
There is no right to vote in the Constitution.
You're not kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you. The Constitution at the nation's birth made no mention of voting rights whatsoever.
Did they just forget to?
No, they didn't forget to. They were unsure, in fact, whether voting was a right or a privilege. And if it was a right, they weren't sure who the right actually belonged to. And in fact, if you look closely at the Constitution, the only office that they refer to as being elected is for the House of Representatives.
This constitutional silence on the right to vote puts the U.S. in some interesting company, including Chechnya, Libya, and Iran.
What we have is a kind of ragtag series of ad hoc constitutional amendments that say you can't discriminate on the basis of race. You can't discriminate on the basis of sex. But other than these kind of anti-discrimination amendments, we don't have the affirmative universal right to vote like you find in the South Africa Constitution, which just simply says everybody's got a right to vote. That's what it means to have a democracy. That's what we the people really means.
Because the drafters of the Constitution left control of voting to the states, we've ended up with a wildly decentralized voting system. So, for example, while in Vermont, people convicted of felonies can vote from the comfort of their prison cells, it's a very different story in Mississippi.
A Canton man convicted of voter fraud is given the maximum sentence. Terrence Watts will serve 10 years in prison for voting illegally twice.
After serving time for a felony, Watts, who was still on the registration rolls, broke the law by merely voting in 2 separate elections. He's scheduled for release in 2020.
It's outrageous. Florida has about 900,000 people with felony convictions who cannot vote. We really need to be in a place where you've done your time, you just get your rights back.
Would a constitutional right to vote help clear up this mess? Well, an amendment to do just that has been stalled in Congress since 2001. Maybe by the time Terrence Watts gets out of prison, every American will be guaranteed the right to vote.
From sea to shining sea.
I'm back with Mo Rocca, the host of Electoral Dysfunction. Mo, electoral dysfunction is something that makes me want to cry, not particularly want to laugh. Why is this material for a humorist?
Well, it's not ha-ha funny. It's maybe sort of grimly hilarious. But the electoral system, the way we run elections in this country, is, as the kids say, completely busted. It's very messy, it's chaotic, and it is enough to make you cry when you start to learn about it. And for me, doing this movie really was a journey of learning how broken it is. It starts with something that I didn't know before, which is that the Constitution does not guarantee us a right to vote. And at first I thought, well, that's really interesting, but that's almost sort of a historical curiosity. But it really isn't. I mean, so many of our problems stem from that constitutional void, that vacuum.
You know, I have to confess, I didn't know that it wasn't written down somewhere in the founding documents of the country. And apparently a lot of the Republicans whose convention we're in the middle of don't know it either, because time after time I hear them from the podium talking about this fundamental American right as if it were part of the fundamental American document.
Right, we all like to say that, and one person, one vote. A lot of people do view voting as a privilege and not as a right. And some people are honest about that, and that's a good thing if they're blunt about it. Tom Tancredo, who is very conservative, former representative from Colorado and presidential candidate, told me in the movie, he said, you know, I think people should have to take a test that's at least equal in difficulty to a citizenship test. And I think a lot of people agree with that sentiment. At least he says it openly.
If Tom Tancredo were writing the test, you and I would both flunk it, I'd say.
Perhaps, yeah, and I would be disenfranchised. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. But it's overwhelming, the level of disorganization. There are 13,000 different voting districts in the United States, and if it were enshrined in the Constitution, if there were an amendment, the right to vote, then there would be a lot more uniformity. And you know, there's something romantic almost about local control when you think about Mayberry in the Andy Griffith Show, but not when you think about Palm Beach County in 2000. That's when you realize local control for certain things, as sacred as voting, is not a good thing.
So why has the idea of a constitutional amendment never really gotten off the ground?
Well, it's stalled. There's been one stalled since 2001. I think constitutional amendments, we know how easy those are to pass. I think that there's that problem. I also think that clearly people are using the void to manipulate and try to purge voter rolls, try to keep the other side from voting. I mean, the voter ID laws, which you guys have covered thoroughly, and this film also deals with, are the most salient example right now, where you have one side, the Republicans, saying we're worried about voting integrity and instituting, starting with Indiana, voter ID laws that do indeed make it more difficult for many people to vote, many of whom are predominantly Democrats. Or at least that's the conventional wisdom, that the people being kept from the voting polls would vote Democrat.
So there's just fundamental disagreement about what that constitutional amendment would authorize if you had one.
Well, I suppose, and right now, by the way, just to clarify, in the amendments there are 5 or 6 mentions of voting, but it's a patchwork. It basically, the 19th Amendment says you can't discriminate on gender. The 15th Amendment says on race. There's a poll tax amendment, and obviously the amendment that allows people over the age of 18 to vote. But this is not the right way to go about things.
You know, there are a lot of countries in the world that do have a constitutional right to vote.
South Africa.
Enshrined. Well, South Africa is, I was around when they wrote that constitution, and that's one. There are many others. And I expect there are some that have it enshrined in their constitution but don't practice it in anything that we would recognize as a real democracy. So having it as a written right is only a guarantee to the extent that you have the experience and the absence of a completely corrupt government.
Oh, absolutely, and I don't. I don't want to sound simplistic about it or naive and think that would be a cure-all. I don't think. I think it would be one way, perhaps, to impose some sort of uniformity. And look, I think elections bring out many people's dark sides, you think, and our better angels are not in charge. And so there should be a
Sitting in the middle of a political convention, I can't imagine what you're talking about.
And, you know, it would be nice if a grown-up were in charge. In Canada, and it almost feels cliche to say, well, in Canada they know how to do it, but there is one uniform ballot that's been used in all elections from British Columbia to Newfoundland. That's the one all the way on the other side, right? And a non-partisan body that oversees this. And they don't have the problems that we have.
You know, there are several countries that make it not only a privilege or a right, but an obligation, where you're actually required to vote. Would the people who advocate putting this into the Constitution, would any of them go as far as that and say you are basically obliged to vote?
I didn't meet any. I don't know. That's an interesting question, and I'm not sure how I feel about that.
That's interesting. You'll be back next week to talk about part 2 in this series.
I'd love to. Thanks.
Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Bill.
If you would like to look at the first doc again, it's available at 8 p.m. Eastern Time tonight at nytimes.com/opinion. Part 2, which premieres next Wednesday, is on an issue we've discussed a little today, voter IDs. So stay tuned.
I'm Megan Lieberman with you for the next hour. John McCain's just taken the floor, so let's take a listen to what he has to say.
By our example as a shining city on a hill. We have led at the direction of patriots from both parties. We have led shoulder to shoulder with steadfast friends and allies. We have led by giving voice to the voiceless, insisting that every human life has dignity, and aiding those brave souls who risk everything to secure the inalienable rights that are endowed to all by our Creator. We have led with generous hearts, moved by an abiding love of justice, to help others eradicate disease, lift themselves from poverty, live under laws of their own making, and determine their own destinies. We have led, when necessary, with the armed might of freedom's defenders. And always we have led from the front, never from behind. This is what makes America an exceptional nation. It's not just a matter of who we are, it's the record of what we have done. It is a responsibility that generation after generations of Americans has affirmed and carried forward. It is the cause that many Americans have sacrificed everything, absolutely everything, to defend, and when they've gone into battle, as they do today, they have done so with a conviction that the country that sent them there is worth their sacrifice, that it stands for something more than the sum of our individual interests. May God bless all who have served, all who serve today, as He has blessed us with their service. We are now being tested by an array of threats that are more complex, more numerous, and just as deeply and deadly as I can recall in my lifetime. We face a consequential choice, and make no mistake, it is a choice. We can choose to follow a declining path toward a future that is dimmer and more dangerous than our past. Or we can choose to reform our failing government, revitalize our ailing economy, and renew the foundations of our power and leadership in the world. That is what's at stake in this election.
We'll check back in the floor later, but right now I'm joined by Jeff Zeleny. So, Jeff, we're having an infusion of defense and foreign policy tonight, which we really have seen strikingly little of so far in
Megan,
this
we've actually seen strikingly little of it in this presidential campaign. It's hard to believe that really it's been 4 years since Senator McCain was the nominee and 8 years since national security was such a central issue
2004
in
was
this
the whole
campaign
election
with President Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney. But I think what Senator McCain is doing here is trying to build up the brand of this Republican ticket a little bit. There are a lot of delegates and Republican voters out here who would like to hear a little bit more of
a
national
ticket with no
security message.
military background here.
Right. It is really the first time that no one has served, has any military service. So he is not, Senator McCain is being received warmly, but this is not his crowd. This is not, it's a different Republican Party than the one he was the nominee of 4 years ago.
And even that Republican Party wasn't necessarily so sure about himself at the time. You raised a really interesting thought with me off camera earlier, which was that this sort of bringing in a lot of this defense and foreign policy tonight was maybe also a way of deflecting a little from Medicare, which is an issue that's so strongly associated with Paul Ryan and is not necessarily a winner for Republicans.
I think this is an example of how Republicans really do have to touch all the signs of the cross here. I mean, this is a domestic election, but Medicare is not necessarily something that this ticket wanted to talk about.
Right.
But in selecting Paul Ryan, it has really energized this ticket, so it's created a few challenges. But Republicans believe that Medicare is not a total losing issue for them at all. They believe that they have confused the issue somewhat and that people are ready for some bolder talk here, some tough talk. We're going to hear a lot more about that from Paul Ryan tonight.
Yeah, and there's something of a division, though, between the Romney-Ryan ticket on this and congressional Republicans, right? Our colleague Jonathan Weissman has said that what he hears from the Hill is that they're really worried about Medicare as an issue.
No question. You talked to some Republicans here who are running in House races. They are worried that Democrats have been sort of given a new issue here, talking about Medicare. But look, it worked for Republicans in 2010, so we're not sure if the old script of making Medicare sort of the third rail of politics here is still going to work, because people are more concerned about the deficit than they were 4 years ago. They're more concerned about spending. So really, that's one of the fascinating things that the next 2 weeks is going to show, especially right here in Florida, where so many voters are on Medicare.
We're also going to hear tonight from some of the presidential, the Veep runner-ups, right? We're going to hear from Rob Portman. We're going to hear from Tim Pawlenty. We're also going to hear from Marco Rubio, whom you talked to earlier.
Right. Senator Rubio is actually speaking tomorrow night. He has been tasked with introducing Mitt Romney. So it's interesting to see what he's going to have to say. And let's take a look at that video for a little preview. Senator Rubio, your task tomorrow night is to introduce Governor Romney. What do you think is still not known about Governor Romney to these delegates, but more importantly to the viewers out in America?
Well, his business success, I think, has been pretty well covered. I think the part I hope people hear more about is Mitt Romney and the success he's had as a person. He's a modest guy. I mean, he didn't like to brag about himself, and I think that's a very admirable quality. But I think it's important for those of us who are his allies and friends to tell that story. Americans deserve to know what a quality person he is, and irrespective of whether they agree with him on a certain issue or not, I think they need to understand that he is a role model for many young people like myself who are, trying to balance work and life.
You said irrespective of if they agree with him on a certain issue. I heard Mrs. Romney say that at the convention last night. What do you mean by that specifically? Are you trying to give people a permission structure to vote for him if they're a cafeteria Romney supporter?
Well, look, no, I think you're not going to agree 100% with anybody on every issue, and certainly President Obama has folks that voted for him that didn't agree with him on everything. I had people come to me all the time and say they didn't agree with Barack Obama on the issues in 2008, but they voted for him because they thought he was kind of a new transformative figure that could elevate American politics. And so my point is, there may be folks that aren't even going to vote for Mitt Romney, no matter what he stands for, but I want them to know who he was, who he is as a person.
What role do you think his faith plays in that? And do you think it's good that some members of his church will be up giving some speeches tomorrow as well to sort of fill in that gap? Up until now, the campaign has been reluctant to do that.
Well, again, I think he's a very modest person, and he tries not to, use these things to political advantage or as political talking points. He was a leader in his church, and by all accounts, a very successful one. I mean, in many ways, he was a pastor. I mean, he ran the church. He had to counsel people. He got calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, had to go to the hospital because someone was sick. I think that helps frame you as a person. It helps influence how you are and who you are, and you're tested in that role.
When you were growing up, you spent some time in the Mormon faith as well. Do you believe that the Mormon faith is a Christian faith? Is it a type of Christianity?
It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And, I'm not a theologian. I don't get into theological debates about people's faith. All I can tell you is that the Mormons that I know and many members of my family consider Jesus Christ to be their personal Lord and Savior, which is at the heart of Christianity.
Do you think that voters in Florida are still skeptical about a Medicare discussion? If it's not the seniors right now, the seniors who will be impacted by, the rising seniors who will be impacted by this, is this still as much of a third rail issue as it was years ago?
Well, I don't know if I'd describe it as a third rail. I'd say it's important, and you have to be clear about where you stand on it. Medicare, 3 million people in my state are on it. One of them is my mother. And I would never support changes to Medicare that would hurt her. The good news is that Republicans have come up with multiple plans now to deal with Medicare in a way that saves it for future generations without having to change it at all for current beneficiaries and people about to retire. And the sooner we act, the less disruptive it will be to make that happen. Now, if President Obama has a better idea how to accomplish that, he should present his idea. But anyone who doesn't have a plan to change Medicare in the long term is in favor of bankrupting it. And so I think voters understand that instinctively in Florida. They really, really do.
How would you describe how the Republican Party has evolved on the immigration debate from 2000, when President George W. Bush was running and first came into office, to right now? Has it been progress or a regression?
Well, the issue has evolved. I mean, it became much more of a serious problem, and people became frustrated because illegal immigration was unaddressed, kept getting worse, and the federal government wasn't doing anything about it. And so people became frustrated by it. And I can tell you from the time I entered politics to today, the political space to do something about it has gotten much tighter and much more difficult. And there are people that are rightfully upset. I mean, you go to a border state like Arizona that's feeling the impacts. It's not about just people crossing the border. It's violence and all these other things that are happening.
Do you believe that some of the debate during the Republican primary, some of it happened right here in Florida, in Tampa, during a debate, has leveled permanent damage to the Republican brand in terms of reaching out to Hispanic voters?
Well, I don't know about permanent damage. I wouldn't characterize it that way. I would say that I don't like every time that Republicans talk about immigration to be in the context of illegal immigration. I'd like for us to make clear that we support legal immigration, that we understand how important legal immigration is for America and its future, how we need immigration in order to grow. I would also say I'd like us to understand that there are people in this country that are undocumented, but for various different circumstances. I mean, there are people out there that are undocumented because some lawyer stole their money and never filed the paperwork. There are people that are undocumented because they came when they were 3 years old and their parents brought them here. So there's a lot of different reasons. If we had a workable guest worker program and a legal immigration system that worked, we wouldn't have as many people here undocumented. So I wish we would be more the pro-legal immigration party
and less the anti-illegal immigration party, and I think we're working towards that.
As you look ahead to your speech tomorrow night, will it be more like Ann Romney's or Chris Christie's, or different mold?
We all have a different job to do. Obviously, Ann Romney's job was to present Mitt Romney, the person. Chris Christie was the keynote address. His job was to lay out a vision of what republicanism means in the 21st century and what role we could play to make the country better. My job is to introduce Mitt Romney and hopefully do it in a way that frames it within the choice that this election presents the American people, which is a choice about what country we want to be. Do we want to continue to be special and different, or do we want America to become like every other country in the world?
I saw that Jon Stewart on The Daily Show said that you were a charisma boy, and he asked if the Romney campaign has asked you to dial it back. Have they?
No, they haven't asked me to do anything on the speech other than to present Mitt Romney, and I'm honored to do it.
Great, Senator. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So, Jeff, this is kind of a preview, this convention of 2016, right? This kind of all the players that we would see if Romney didn't win. Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie.
Sure.
It's kind of like a bake-off.
It's one of the things that conventions are for, of course. And one thing we're seeing is that Republicans really have a much deeper bench.
Yeah.
We saw that last night. We saw Governor Nikki Haley of South Carolina. We saw all of the new governors elected in 2010. And we're really seeing these people, of course, if Governor Romney is not successful in November. The man we see later tonight, Paul Ryan, he will be at the front of that pack of Republicans. But there's also Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin, who received booming applause last night.
He got like the biggest applause other than Ann Romney last night.
One difference about this convention and the Democratic convention next week is that the Republican convention has a much deeper bench. The Democratic convention is highlighting Bill Clinton, much more of a return to the past, not the future.
Right.
It's a problem for both parties, but it's just the evolution of both parties in America.
Yeah. Now, we've seen some excerpts of Paul Ryan's speech for later. It was kind of interesting. It definitely seems like he's going to highlight the economy, which isn't that much of a surprise. He says, we have a plan for a stronger middle class with the goal of generating 12 million new jobs over the next 4 years. Of course, you can have a goal of, I guess, creating 20 million new jobs over the next 4 years.
That's one of the things campaigns are about. You can talk about a lot of things, but he's trying to do a couple different things here. His advisors tell me that he first and foremost has to bring a little bit of Janesville into this hall. Of course, that's Janesville, Wisconsin. This is his biggest introduction to America at large. People in this hall know him.
He's not a national figure,
After all, when Governor Romney introduced him on a Saturday just a couple weeks ago, not that many people were watching on television. So this is his big chance. But he's also going to make it fairly policy heavy. He's going to say that the country has stark choices. So one thing he probably will not do is his trademark PowerPoint presentation. He's famous for sort of going through spending and debt and deficit. At least his advisors say he's not going to do that. It'd be a little wonky if he did, but he's 42 years old. It'll be a striking contrast from the speech 4 years ago when Sarah Palin addressed the crowd and really delighted that crowd, and then things went a little bit south from there.
Right. It's also going to be a personal story for him. As you were saying, he's got to put some Janesville into this room.
Right.
And actually, just when you and I left earlier, Paul Ryan and his family did their little practice walk on the stage, and the kids were waving. And
it really is quite a scene. I mean, he has young children. His wife is a former Democrat from a prominent political family in Oklahoma. So the country really is going to see an introduction to a lot of Ryans, and then tomorrow night a lot of Romneys. So at the end of this convention, there will be a lot of children and grandchildren all across that stage.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Megan.
And now the next installment of our Agenda series, which looks at some of the big issues facing the next president. Tonight it's the environment and how we can meet our energy needs.
I'm John Broder of the New York Times. And in 2009, everything seemed possible on climate change. There was momentum in the House, there was momentum internationally. And yet today, it is barely a blip on the agenda. During the campaign of 2008, climate change was not a large subject of conversation, in part because both candidates agreed. Senator John McCain had been something of a pioneer in the United States Senate, sponsoring a number of bills that would have introduced a cap-and-trade program to address carbon emissions that are blamed for the warming of the planet. Barack Obama, if anything, was even more enthusiastic than Senator McCain, so there was really no conflict and really no debate. The House bill passed in 2009 ran into a dead end in the Senate, and many lawmakers were concerned that any scheme to address climate change would involve higher energy prices, and they were afraid that that was going to cost jobs. By the 2010 midterm elections, the idea of climate change had become largely radioactive on both sides of the political divide. As governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney was an early proponent of regional action to address climate change. Even having Massachusetts join a consortium of northeastern states in a cap-and-trade program. Today, he has more or less reversed his position on that. He says he's not sure that climate change is even caused by human activities and is not a strong proponent of government action to address it. President Obama realizes that there's no realistic chance of passing any sort of comprehensive climate change bill or a cap-and-trade scheme for the United States. So he's begun to address the problem by taking smaller steps. He believes that the fuel economy of the domestic auto fleet can be vastly improved. He is also supporting projects in wind, solar, and geothermal energy using the grant program at the Department of Energy. This is part of a series that we'll be running throughout the course of the campaign, and we're looking for input from readers like you to talk about some of the issues that maybe the candidates themselves are not addressing in a direct way. And we're hoping that you can be part of that process.
I'm joined now by Larry Hart of the American Conservative Union to talk more about energy issues. So Larry, I know you are not a great fan of the administration's energy policies. Give me your sort of short explanation of what your objections to the way that the administration's handled energy.
Sure. I think the objective of any administration is to pursue policies that give abundant, affordable energy for all. Energy is so fundamental. I'm so glad that you're making this part of your series, because energy is so fundamental to people's standard of living, to people's to the economy, and to jobs. And this administration has pursued policies that are inimical to all that. They are pursuing policies to make energy less affordable and less abundant, and therefore very harmful to our economy and to people's standard of living.
We got a house band playing in the background.
We have a competition.
But we're gonna let that go.
Musical background.
So tell me, grade. Mitt Romney sort of released his energy plan last week. Give me a grade. What did you think of it?
I give it an A-. I think it's
pretty good.
It's a very exciting plan. As a matter of fact, it actually outlines policies that the American Conservative Union, who I work with,
has put out there in the past.
Yes, that has advocated these policies for many years, with an additional bold new proposal that he has.
Well, let's get a little more specific. What are your favorite things about the policy?
Well, we can say what we have already talked about many times, and that is that we should pursue the policies that increase domestic energy production. This includes drilling both offshore and on land.
But you're particularly interested in the fact that this is going to allow more drilling on federal land, right?
That's correct. And that is, of course, where the Obama administration has just practically shut down. So as they have offshore oil drilling, they have just made it absolutely impossible. Of course, on day one, it calls for approving the XL pipeline from Canada, which is absurd that we would not want to increase our imports from one of the friendliest countries, oil-producing countries in the world.
What about offshore drilling?
And offshore drilling, it calls for a new 5-year leasing plan. You know, a lot of people think that offshore drilling was shut down because of the BP oil spill. The fact is that the Secretary of the Interior, Ken Salazar, as soon as he took office, immediately threw out the 5-year leasing plan of the Bush administration and said, we're going to start all over and slow it all down.
This gives it to the state. This plan would give power to the states of offshore drilling. There are states like Florida, though, where it's been very controversial and they don't necessarily like it. It doesn't necessarily mean it would expand everywhere, right?
But on the other hand, the Commonwealth of Virginia, where I happen to live, has been trying for years to get permission for offshore oil drilling.
So let's talk about the other side of this coin that people frequently talk about, the environment. Do you have any concerns about the environmental impacts of so much increased drilling, both onshore, offshore, and on federal lands?
We have so vastly increased the environmental safeguards of this type of effort. That it's a given that you would only pursue this with the environmental safeguards which are in place, and that isn't what's holding it up. What's holding it up is strictly an ideological agenda.
Do you think there's any room for alternative energy plans in this, or are you strictly a fossil fuels guy?
Absolutely not. There absolutely is a place for it, and the fact is I had the opportunity to work in the Department of Energy and the House Energy and Environment Subcommittee of the Science Committee, and work and learn the programs. This was back in the 1990s, and learn the programs of basic research and development in the national labs. And there's absolutely these efforts should be pursued so that renewable energy in the long run could be competitive with fossil fuels. That's not the policy of this administration at all. If you take a look at basic research, those funds are not the dramatic increase. The dramatic increase are for programs like Solyndra, where they hand out checks to their political friends for products that are already in the marketplace.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
And now back to our media center, where Rick Burke is there again with Deputy Washington Bureau Chief Carl Hulse. Hey, Rick.
Hey, Megan, thanks a lot. Now, Carl, this is the night Americans are going to learn who Paul Ryan is. Right. You've known him, though, covered him for years and years. You even go to the same barber he goes to.
It's a woman, Hannah, at Bubbles on Capitol Hill. Just a little plug there.
And how much is the cut?
Actually, it's like $35.
Really?
Now, so,
and do you get all the gossip?
$5 tip.
Do you get all the gossip?
I can't break hairdresser patient confidentiality.
Well, what do you know about Paul Ryan that people haven't seen yet?
I mean, I think we know him pretty well. He's a very gregarious guy. He's fun. He listens to heavy metal. He is very accessible, approachable, real normal, sort of Wisconsin guy. I'm from Northern Illinois. It's very similar. But he is somebody who's very ambitious, and he's shown that in his career.
Now, tonight he's going to be in a very supportive role, sort of bolstering Mitt Romney's
Although some
credentials.
people see him as the main attraction in some ways.
But for someone you've seen getting a lot of attention as Budget Committee head, how is he going to deal with being the understudy?
I think that he'll be fine because he still was subservient to the leadership in Congress, right? And he had that role to play. I think he'll be fine with that. I do think that he's probably having to hold back and restrain himself a little bit, that he has also has a habit and a record of speaking out, even when he was crossing, say, John Boehner wanted something a little different than the speaker. But I think he's, from what I've heard, I haven't talked to him since he got picked. From what I've heard, though, he's very excited about this, sees this as a great opportunity, and definitely doesn't want to mess it up.
And he and President Obama have had an interesting sort of
relationship. They've had some direct confrontations. I think when it started out, I think the president thought that Ryan, they're one's from Illinois, one's from Wisconsin. They were both kind of wonky, nerdy in some respects when it comes to details of government. Somebody he could work with, but he quickly found out that they had very different ideas about what to do about things.
Now, how does he navigate Medicare to his advantage? I know that may be hurting the down-ticket Republicans, having Ryan on the ticket. But they're trying to play to their advantage.
I think at the presidential level, so far we've been seeing that at the presidential level it hasn't been too negative for Romney and Ryan. But in the individual House races, it does seem to be cutting against the Republicans. The Republicans now think that they have a good explanation. They are the ones that are going to preserve Medicare for the future. The changes aren't going to be that big. You remember he did pull back a bit from his changes because in the plan as it's set up now, you could still opt to stay in Medicare, although it would probably become less and less attractive. But I think it is going to continue to be a political problem because the polls have shown consistently Democrats are trusted to a much greater degree on Medicare. There's just a big history there. You remember when you were in Washington, Newt Gingrich's famous "Wither on the Vine" line about Medicare, and that's stuck with them. So I think it's going to be a continuing problem.
Now, there have been issues with House Republicans and Mitt Romney. Is the pick of Ryan going to help bring them along?
Yes, totally.
Or not?
Paul Ryan he's just such a celebrity and an icon, really, to the House Republicans, especially the 87 freshmen. I mean, to them, this sealed the deal in a lot of respects. They now own part of the ticket. I mean, I think that that was a major move there to solidify that relationship.
Right. Now, beginning tonight, we're going to see Paul Ryan front and center. He'll be campaigning around the country until Election Day. How good a campaigner is he?
I think he's got a lot to learn. I mean, he's run a lot of town meetings, obviously, in his district, and has gone and he's helped raise money, but that's nothing, as you know, to running a national campaign and being out there all the time.
And he's never really had the first
time
he
race
ran,
was
that
tough,
was it.
and it's a friendly district, right? He has been there his entire life. Now he's going to be out there. He's going to be challenged a lot more. But from watching him so far, it seems to me like this is kind of typical Paul Ryan in that he has learned a set response to everything that can come up, and he does it very well. He's very articulate. He just is a nice looking guy, and he delivers the message well. But I would expect some slip ups, and I think that foreign policy is going to be a rough spot for him. He just doesn't have much experience there, and I'm sure he's being briefed, but I mean, I think that's a potential area of trouble.
And then what are you going to be looking for, just jumping ahead from tonight to the debate he'll have with Joe Biden?
The battle of the Irish Catholics. I think that will be very interesting. Joe Biden has been in these debates more. He has some experience. Paul Ryan hasn't ever been in a situation like that. Paul Ryan is very sharp and can, quick with rejoinder. But the thing about Joe Biden, and I have heard from Republicans say, Paul Ryan's so smart, he's going to clean Joe Biden's clock. But Joe Biden ran the budget talks, if you remember, 2 years ago. He is very familiar with the details of the budget, and he's very familiar with foreign policy. So I don't think it's going to be a pushover. I think it's going to be a very closely watched debate. People will really want to see, the battle of the Irish Catholics, and, their upbringings are different. Joe Biden from a little more humble circumstances. So I'm excited about it.
Right. Before I let you go, we revealed on the front page of the New York Times today that Paul Ryan, when he first came to Washington, was a waiter at Tortilla Coast, a popular watering hole on Capitol Hill. First of all, do you go there?
I have been to Tortilla Coast. It's been several bars, but it's got a good all-you-can-eat fajita deal still on the weekends.
Do you think they'll now have a Paul Ryan drink or something?
I'm sure that they would have to come up with some kind of Paul Ryan commemoration in there. That bar has been there a long time. It's near Bullfeathers, and a lot of things have happened in that bar over the years.
I bet. To be continued. Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, Rick.
One of the coolest things we've been doing here at the Times during this convention is having illustrator Christoph Niemann creating a new video every day based on social media reaction to the convention. Here's his latest.
I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy, a Yankee Doodle do or die, a real live nephew of my Uncle Sam's, born on the 4th of July. Good boy, kid, I've got a Yankee Doodle sweetheart. She's my Yankee Doodle joy. Yankee Doodle came to London just to ride the ponies. I am the Yankee Doodle boy. I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy, a Yankee Doodle do or die, a real live nephew of my Uncle Sam's, born on the 4th of July. Good boy, kid, I've got a Yankee Doodle sweetheart. She's my Yankee Doodle joy. Yankee Doodle came to London just to ride the ponies. I am the Yankee Doodle boy.
Christoph Niemann joins me now to tell us more about how he comes up with these videos. Really ingenious. How do you do it?
I don't know. It's like at the end of the night I look at these and I wonder, geez, if you would have told me in the morning, I would have been even more scared than I am.
Where do you find these tweets from? You just kind of look around and pick ones out that you could best illustrate?
I was looking forward to just spending all day on Twitter and being inspired, but I frantically search both sides, the Republican and the Democratic side, and also just try to find random things of people watching the election.
Now, this is your first convention. You're from Germany. You came here 10 or 12 years ago. How does this feel to be an American political convention suddenly weighing in on the politics? Does the outsider status give you more of a fresh eye,
Well,
you think?
I definitely want to have that status of like the everyday person coming in here and seeing that. And I've seen conventions in the on television. For me, what's fun is there's a certain amount of it that's just sports. You go there and like there's the commentators and there's everything. And if you would replace politicians with sports, it was like the Olympics essentially.
Right. Now, speaking of sports, you were just at the Olympics for us doing much the same thing. Is there better material among Olympians or among Republicans and Democrats at their conventions?
Well, I have to admit, like, once you think about what's actually at stake, of course, it's harder to kind of like really see the lighter side of things. And like with sports, it's only sports. And here, every once in a while, you, or like every couple of minutes, you get reminded that this is about real stuff. So obviously, that's a little bit of a mental stretch to make like absurd video things on something that's in a way still serious.
I'm impressed by how authentic and lifelike your illustrations are, down to the carpet here in the arena. What's your technique, and where did you learn to draw like this?
Well, on the one hand, like, you know, drawing since I was like a small child, but I have to say that working for a newspaper and really like working at the times where you have to work on incredibly tight deadlines is where I probably learned most, because like a big story breaks at 5 o'clock, you need the story at 6, and can't tell the world politicians to kind of like make their actions based on the newspaper schedule. So that was good training.
And what kind of reaction have you gotten from your work on Twitter?
Well, so far I have to say they were mostly positive, and I was a little afraid that eventually somebody like from one side or the other would see something and get really upset, and so far that hasn't happened yet, but maybe they haven't looked closely enough.
But you've tried to be pretty even-handed.
I mean, ultimately I want to comment the comments on politics. I don't want to like pretend like I have really like a breaking news or like a new way of seeing things. I'm a political person, but this thing is really about commenting on social media, commenting on like how people try to condense the talking points into even shorter talking points.
And I don't get a sense of any partisan leaning really at all from what you do.
Well, it is in there, definitely.
Well, just don't tell us, because I don't want to know, you know. And now after this, you'll be going to the Democratic convention, doing much the same thing?
Unfortunately, I have to go to my little convention at home, like my little kind of party committee of my kids. They need me back, so I can't do Charlotte.
Well, I hope down the road you'll go to the debates and do all this for us. It's really great to see.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks, Christoph.
Thank you.
Now back to the Skybox with Mike Scheer. Mike?
Thanks, Rick. Let's listen for a few minutes now to what's going on the floor behind me.
The Senate Republican Conference, John Thune.
Thank you. Thank you, South Dakota, and good evening, my fellow Republicans. It's no secret that I'm a sports fan. In fact, I get asked all the time if I've ever played basketball with President Obama. The answer is no. I'm still waiting for that invitation. The next question is, do you think you could take him one-on-one? And I say, I really don't know. I've never seen him play. But I can tell you this. President Obama would be easy to defend because you know he's always going to go to his left. Like many Americans, I've been blessed by the hard work and sacrifice of those who've come before. You see, it was back in 1906 that two Norwegian brothers named Nikolai and Matthew Gjelsvik came to this country in search of the American dream. When they reached the shores of America, the only English words they knew were the words apple pie and coffee, which evidently they had plenty of on the trip over. The immigration officials at Ellis Island determined that their name, Gjelsvik, which was spelled G-J-E-L-S-V-I-K, was too difficult to spell and pronounce. So they asked him to change it. The two brothers picked the name of the farm where they worked in Norway, which was called the Thune Farm. And so Nikolai Yelsvik became Nick Thune, my grandfather. With their new country and their new name, the two brothers began their new life by working on the railroad. They learned English and saved enough money to start a small hardware store. And yes, Mr. President, they did build it. My grandfather raised three sons. The middle son, my father, joined the Navy when World War II broke out. He became a naval aviator, flying combat missions off the aircraft carrier Intrepid in the Pacific Theater. On one mission, he shot down 4 enemy aircraft, for which he received the Distinguished Flying Cross. After the war, my dad quietly returned to South Dakota to his hardware store and his family. You know, many versions of that story are told all across this country. The details may be different, but the dream is the same. I hate to say it, but that dream is in serious jeopardy. We have a sluggish economy, burdened by Obama administration policies that are weighing down our job creation. Middle-class Americans in cities and on our farms are bearing the brunt. The big government bureaucrats of the Obama administration have set their sights on our way of life. Instead of preserving family farms and ranches, President Obama's policies are effectively regulating them out of business. His administration even proposed banning farm kids from doing basic chores. Since President Obama took office, we've had 42 consecutive months of unemployment above 8%, the longest streak on record. The cost of family health insurance premiums has risen by nearly 19%. College tuition has increased by 25%, and fuel costs have doubled. The number of people on food stamps has increased by 45%. And the debt that we are piling on the backs of our children and grandchildren has gone up by 50%. Yet for all of President Obama's talk about the middle class incomes are down. Folks, we won't be in this situation with Mitt Romney in the White House. He understands what it takes for businesses large and small to grow and to create jobs. This knowledge doesn't come from a textbook, although he's read plenty of those. It comes from decades of rolling up his sleeves and getting the job done. It comes from recognizing the strengths and contributions of every individual. His experience tells him that the most valuable insight can be gained not by lecturing, but by listening. And when he does use his presidential bully pulpit, it will be to champion the cause of small business and make it clear to all companies that it is a safe
a very warm welcome to Senator Rob Portman of Ohio.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, America. And hello to the fired up delegation from the Buckeye State right there in front of me. My name is Rob Portman, and they say I was on Governor Romney's short list of vice presidential candidates. Apparently, it wasn't short enough. What a great convention, and I'm delighted to be here tonight to talk about the fundamental differences between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama when it comes to understanding our economy. Let's begin by talking about something the Democrats love to demonize: Mitt Romney's success in the private sector. He built a company from the ground up, created lots of jobs, and yes, he made money. He made it the old-fashioned way, folks. He earned it. Then you have Barack Obama, who never started a business, never even worked in business, and yet he claims those who have should give credit to the government or someone else for their success. So you have one candidate who understands that success comes from working hard, competing, and taking risks. And you have another candidate who believes that success comes from government. Let me ask you this: which one do you think knows how to turn around this economy? Right answer. Let me ask you this: which one would you choose to invest your life savings? Should it be any different for safeguarding our nation's economy? Or let's say you don't have any savings. Let's say you're worried about how to pay September's rent or mortgage. Let's say you're one of the millions of Americans out of work, or millions more who have given up looking for work. You've got to be running out of patience and hope. You've got to be tired, looking for a new start. Well, you don't have to be patient any longer. Through your vote this fall, you can change the leadership of this country and the opportunities for you and your family. America, it's been nearly 4 years of 8% unemployment, double-digit unemployment for young people, Hispanics, African Americans. 4 years. FDR and Truman won an entire world war in 4 years. America is tired of waiting. Listen, in business,
You've been listening to Rob Portman, but we're back live, and I'm joined once again by Jeff Zeleny. So Jeff Portman was kind of funny with that joke about being the runner-up, huh?
He was. Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. He attacked head-on what people have been talking about. He said there was a rumor that I was on the vice presidential shortlist. I guess I wasn't short enough. But he is still going to play a key role in this campaign. He's going to play the role of Barack Obama in practice debate sessions for Mitt Romney. So they're going to begin their practices this Sunday, and they're going to practice at least 6 or 7 times. So not quite the role he was expecting, but not a bad one.
Still a good role. While we were off, there was also a little scuffle on the floor with some of the Paul delegates from the Maine delegation who are still not so happy about what's going on here.
Yeah, there was. Our photojournalists captured this scene, and it was the delegates from Maine who were walking around the convention hall and were saying, so goes Maine, so goes as goes Maine, so goes the nation. And what they're talking about is that they are still upset that the Ron Paul's Maine delegates were not seated on the floor here. So it's just the lingering resentment from Ron Paul people, but it gets quieter and quieter and quieter as the day goes on. This night, tonight, is about Paul Ryan.
Yeah. Probably not that big a deal. Probably will get made a big deal of by the other side. And in fact, speaking of the other side, you actually had an interview today. There's a whole cadre of Democrats who are down here. You spoke to Stephanie Cutter from the Obama campaign. What was that like?
I did. Just a few blocks away from this Republican gathering where thousands of Republicans are here behind me in a small war room. The Democrats are monitoring every utterance here. Stephanie Cutter, the deputy campaign manager for the Obama campaign, is down monitoring it. Let's take a look at that video. Stephanie, thanks for joining us. So we're standing in the Democratic National Committee's war room. We're just a couple blocks from the Republican National Convention. Why are Democrats here, and why is a senior Obama official like yourself here in Tampa this week?
Well, there are only 71 days left before the election, and we think it's important not to cede any one of those days in laying out the choice. You know, it was interesting yesterday at the Republican convention. You heard very little about Mitt Romney's plans on how he wants to move this country forward. In fact, you heard very little about Mitt Romney. So we're here to talk about Mitt Romney and the plans that he's put on the table for the economy, which, you know, includes a $5 trillion tax cut geared towards the wealthy, paid for by a $2,000 tax increase for middle-class families with kids. That's a fact. Paul Ryan is speaking tonight. It'll be interesting to see if Ryan walks the American people through his Medicare plan, which turns Medicare into a voucher, or whether or not he's going to explain why he thinks that millionaires and billionaires need another $250,000 tax cut paid for by education cuts, clean energy cuts, potentially even cuts in veterans funding.
Well, why not give Republicans a week here to let them introduce Mitt Romney? Why not be out in America doing this somewhere else? Why come to Tampa?
Well, we're doing both. You know, Mitt Romney said he wants to have a substantive debate. There was no substance in the convention hall last night. We'll see if there's substance in the convention hall tonight. You know, he picked Paul Ryan because he was the intellectual leader of the Republican Party. So we're expecting some of those ideas to be laid out.
We heard a lot of President Obama's own words last night, and a lot of the themes of this Republican convention are built around his own sound bites, like "we can build it." How worried are you by this "we can build it" a theme that they are?
Not worried at all. The American people know that, you know, the president stands behind small businesses, wants to help them thrive and prosper, but he, like every other small business in this country, understands that you need good roads and bridges to transport your goods. You need a good workforce that you educate through our school system. You need innovation and technology and research funded by the government to help us compete globally. These are the things that we need to do together to help our small businesses thrive. In fact, some of the small businesses that appeared on stage at the Republican convention last night are benefiting from government investment.
Don't have an advanced look at their program, obviously. So this is one of the moments that's a little.
Neither do they.
How so?
Well, you know, I thought it was curious that Ann Romney, which was a wonderful speech, talking about love and the importance of love for this country and bring this country together. And then you have Governor Christie stand up and say, this isn't about love, this is about respect. And what he's really saying there is, you might not like Mitt Romney, but he's our nominee, so get behind him, which is interesting. We know that enthusiasm has been a problem on Romney's side. We know that he's had a hard time consolidating the Republican Party behind him. But it was a real contrast in message between their two primetime speakers.
The speech last night by Mrs. Romney was largely directed toward a female audience. What do you think the prospect of the Romney campaign closing the gender gap is?
It was a powerful speech that she gave. I think that women care less about rhetoric and more about policies. And as we know, Mitt Romney still is not behind the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. He's still not behind equal pay laws for women for equal work. And that's a problem. American women know that Paul Ryan voted against those laws when they needed it most. So that, I think, matters more than a soundbite.
So, Jeff, this kind of Oppo research operation has really become a part of these conventions, hasn't it?
It does. I mean, and it's going to repeat itself next week. The Republicans will be in
obviously.
Charlotte where
They
the
will have a war
Democrats
room.
are gathering. And it just speaks to, I mean, it is 69 days left in this election.
Right.
Early voting begins in Iowa September 27th, Ohio on October 2nd. So you really have to win the hour. You cannot let any opportunity pass you by.
Yeah, it was striking when she said to you, we can't give up a single day. And they really feel like they can't give up a single minute of the news cycle.
Especially when there are live speeches going on. I mean, they will be monitoring and tracking Vice Presidential nominee Paul Ryan's speech tonight. It's coming up in an hour. Absolutely. Kind of like a debate. When you watch a debate in real time, any live event creates an opportunity for the other side to mix it up a little bit.
And it does feel like this Oppo research thing from the other side has stepped up a lot from 4 years ago. And I wonder if is that just the Twitter effect? Is that just social media has moved
I
things
think
along?
the whole campaign has accelerated in some respects. Sometimes it used to be a news cycle equal to a day. Now a news cycle can happen several times a day.
Right.
And the campaigns, but the larger point is sometimes a controversy can move on faster than it used to. Controversies really don't linger. Even something that looks terrible for a campaign, really they've only lasted a couple days here. So there are good upsides and downsides about that. But 69 days until the election. Hard to believe, but that's what it is.
But it's kind of amazing how these sort of gaffes that sometimes you thought would be the game changer, the macaca moment, those things that like you really thought might end a candidacy or really profoundly change the race.
Right.
You feel like you've had like 15 of them in a week sometimes. You
No
know?
question. But as we've heard during this convention, a lot of President Obama's words have become a soundtrack used against him here.
Well, certainly we
you
built
build
it.
And so that is one of the things that definitely lasts. And next week we'll hear the same thing. Mitt Romney has had his fair share of
I like to
misstatements
fire
as
people,
well.
kind of stuff, yeah.
Right.
So we'll hear a lot of that.
Right.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
Thank you.
That's all for me. David Brooks and Gail Collins of the Opinion Desk take over for a few minutes, and then Jim Roberts will be back with Ben Smith for one more look at social media before the big speeches begin. I'm Megan Lieberman. Thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm David Brooks. I'm a columnist for the New York Times, and I'm joined by Gail Collins, who is, in the spirit of redundancy, also a columnist for the New York Times. We are every week on Wednesdays in the online edition. We do a feature called The Conversation, where Gail and I have a little online chit-chat. But now, because we're in real life together in the same spot in Tampa, Florida, we are doing it in person, on video.
This is so exciting.
And here we are. And so we have just finished day one. We're in the middle of day two. We've just seen Paul Ryan mount the podium for his rehearsal. But
he was great.
It was
great.
fantastic. So let's talk about day one.
Day one.
Ann Romney, the star.
Yeah, you were a big Ann Romney, I can't wait, this is going to be fantastic
Yes.
person. Did she live up to your great expectations?
I have to say she did not. She did talk about love. There was a nice contrast. She talked about love. Chris Christie later talked about respect, which is the difference between being a Roman and being a Christian.
He said respect was more important than love.
She thought love was more important, so that was already an important philosophical
this is the sort of thing
difference.
you love.
I guess I thought there's a rule in writing, show don't tell. And I would have liked to see some anecdotes where she actually described how Mitt Romney lived out the humanity that she was endorsing, but didn't really illustrate.
I was thinking that when she was talking, and then afterwards, where is the anecdote? And I was thinking of my very favorite wooden presidential candidate family anecdote to humanize him, and it was the time that John Kerry's daughters were talking about how their father had rescued their hamster that was drowning and pulled it out of the water and gave it CPR, and it was so... I could never forget that during the entire year. I thought, licorice, this man gave mouth to mouth to a hamster.
And how did it
didn't
work?
help. It did not
he
help
died,
at all.
the hamster, it's a late hamster?
No, the hamster lived, but
He
Kerry's
saved the
campaign
hamster.
died.
Wow.
So
Okay.
maybe not.
Now, what about, there was a time, the first third of the speech, I thought Helen Reddy was going to show up. There was a lot of I am woman, hear me roar. Did that work for you? Did that?
Didn't work. Whenever you keep saying, woman, we are women, you're women. I can see you out there. You are women. I like that so much. You are women, and I'm a woman. We are mothers, brothers. It feels like protesteth too much or something.
I saw some people for whom it was clearly working.
Yeah, there were weepy eyes.
There were weepy eyes, and I'm not a big believer in subtlety. I recall when there was a poll in the Clinton campaign, the country's on the wrong track. So Clinton and Gore took a train called the Right Track Express and said, people said, oh yeah, we're on the right track. They're on the train. So that.
I'm not sure. How could Romney do that, though? The non-wooden, non-plastic.
They would have to dance with Ellen DeGeneres. Now let's go to Chris Christie. There was controversy or discussion. He promised hard times ahead.
He also said "I" about 250,000 times.
That's his best subject. So I see. Stick with your strength. There was some discussion. Maybe the country shouldn't promise hard times. We've had a lot of hard times. Let's promise some good times. Let's be upbeat.
I sort of like that part. This was what we've been hearing all along from people like you who are fans of the sort of Romney-Ryan thought process, that these people are going to tell the truth. We've never had a politician in how long who would actually speak the truth and say, look, things are going to be difficult. And if you don't say that, then how can you expect people to accept it when you make them sacrifice? And, so kudos to Chris Christie.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the challenges they have to face this convention is preparing for the onslaught of Medicare attacks from the Democrats. And if you've laid the predicate, okay, these are tough choices, we got to face them, it seems to me you've prepared yourself for that when the onslaught eventually comes.
On the other hand, it seemed deeply ironic that these were the same people who were running those ads aimed at seniors in Florida saying, Obama is going to take your money and give it to people who need it for health care, and it's yours for your health care. And nobody, I mean, the most selfish ads I have ever seen in my life. So,
now, how about any other speeches grab you?
I cannot wait tonight to see and hear Paul Ryan, which I never thought, David, in my entire life I would ever be saying ever. But this is a big moment. See how this guy does. Is he going to be good? Is he going to be fascinating? You would have a really good idea.
He's going to carry a stack of Congressional Budget Office reports out there and just read from them. So that'll be great. I'll be so thrilled. I've seen him speak several times. He's a good speaker. He's not a literary speaker. There's not any poetry in there, but there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of conviction, and a lot of it is very genuine. So I think he'll be a B-plus speaker. What'll be interesting again is how much he talks about Romney, because again they've really not filled in those blanks very well. They wasted the first night really not doing that, I think. And so they've got to hit hard the next two.
So all we've got is Mitt Romney. Will Mitt Romney talk about Mitt Romney? Is this a
he
possibility?
better. Well, he's the person least likely to talk about Mitt Romney. And then quickly, any thoughts on Condoleezza Rice, our other star tonight?
Never heard her knock anybody's socks off with speeches, I'm sure.
I have, actually.
Really?
I've done some of the
So
things
this
with
is something
her
to
for
look forward
very
to.
Democratic audiences, and she gets standing ovations. She does get standing
This is the
O's.
first time the word foreign policy is going to be mentioned ever in this convention,
I think it'll have more to do with her upbringing, I predict, than foreign policy.
No more foreign policy.
I think it'll be more struggling strivers. And that's the American Dream, as seen by Gail and I in Tampa, Florida. We will be doing a written conversation, which will be appearing in the Sunday review section in the paper edition of the New York Times. And then Gail and I will be back in Charlotte with the Democrats. See you then.
Hi, I'm Jim Roberts. I'm sitting here with Ben Smith, editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed. Here we are again, another night of unscripted. This is the unscripted portion of our show. I hope to have a little fun. Okay, we'll have a little bit of fun. But the first thing, I do want to script a couple of things. So, earlier today, Ben and I both shot out a tweet to some of our followers asking for 6 words to describe Paul Ryan, who'll be speaking shortly. I'll say to the audience again, if you have 6 words, you want to tweet it to BuzzFeed Ben or NYT Jim, now's your chance to do it. Before we get back to some of their answers, though, I wanted to talk to you, Ben, about a couple of the headlines that we saw today. I think, there are a lot of things to talk about, but the first thing I'm very curious about is the news actually that Obama made today, a little bit of counter-programming on another social media platform, Reddit.
Yeah, he did an AMA, an Ask Me Anything on Reddit, which is it's a huge platform. I mean, like, we see it in our traffic. You probably see it in your traffic.
We do, yeah.
I mean, it just drives, like, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people will come to a story from Reddit. Millions of people are on there. And we've done some analysis. It's really growing all the time. So Obama went on there. The funny thing is, he went on there and he answered questions, and he gave pretty boring answers. He, like 80% of the questions were about marijuana, and he did not really engage with those. He answered, he talked about the space program.
Right.
He talked about internet freedom. He kept it pretty vague. He didn't really make a lot of news, but he kind of treated it like a constituency group, like a community, and he clearly was prepared. Reddit has been asking for the folks on Reddit have been asking for, in fact, filing Freedom of Information law requests for the secret White House beer recipe.
Okay.
And he made the main news he made on this Reddit thing is that the beer recipe will be out soon. His FOIL requests do not apply to the White House, but I guess he's voluntarily releasing it. And he also referenced the not bad meme, which is this like face that he's this sort of mug that he has put on at times that kind of went viral and has become kind of a Reddit thing of kind of limited approval, reflects sort of limited approval. And so he said that he said that his what he thinks about the Reddit experience is that it's not bad, kind of a play on his own his own internet persona.
Now, he did talk about a couple of substantive subjects. I saw a couple of headlines regarding campaign finance, the Citizen United case. saying that he thought that a constitutional amendment might be called for to deal with that. I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is,
the space exploration question was not surprising from the a more nerdy community like Reddit,
I mean,
right?
it was not a bad question at all.
Right.
I mean, he was not like on there acting like a Redditor. He was on there acting like the President of the United States.
Although there were a few grammatical errors that he seemed to introduce into his responses.
There were some typos.
Some typos, and then people jumped on it, right?
And they fixed them, yeah. But he also verified himself. The little kind of raw cell phone photo of himself in the White House.
Yeah, Reddit has, I think, established, gotten, a little bit more traction amongst, maybe the mainstream the last few weeks, months. The shooting in Aurora certainly brought them a lot of attention. Obviously, this thing will too, and it's very interesting today. I read that the servers were crashing as a result of all the traffic coming in.
He crashed Reddit, which is pretty impressive. I mean, but it is. I mean, it's a funny world. I mean, it's the President of the United States really like 1 or 2 clicks away from all kinds of pornography. From all kinds. I mean, from stuff that much less the New York Times. Some stuff that might not make it onto BuzzFeed. In this very raw community right after the Aurora shootings, there were folks on Reddit posting pictures of their open, gaping bullet wounds, right onto these threads.
Let me move on to just some of the other headlines that that we've been paying attention to today. In fact, maybe this one will kick it ahead a little bit to tomorrow and to Romney's acceptance speech. Both BuzzFeed and the New York Times have stories running. I think yours is already published. Ours is about to be about Romney and his own Mormonism.
Yeah.
Your reporter, McKay Coppins, had a really interesting story about that today.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, what's really interesting is that Romney, there was the experience of 2007 was really pretty awful for his family. It was like people, I think at some point people wouldn't shake his wife's hand in Iowa because they didn't want to touch a Mormon, or at least this is the experience as filtered through their kids' friends to McKay. And so I think, this cycle, the kind of lesson had been, we're just not going to engage it. We're not going to touch it.
Right.
Get a
Duck
stock
and cover,
answer.
I think, is how he referred to it. Yeah.
And I think that has changed in the last couple of weeks. They made a decision that they need as part of this campaign to tell people who he is, to talk about it openly. Ann Romney last night, I think, used the word Mormon for the first time anybody on the campaign has spoken that word this year.
I also noticed that our reporter, Jody Cantor, who is also working on this similar story, said that she had been talking to quite a few Mormons who were really wanting him to actually say something and to sort of affirm his faith and just really be open about it.
I think Mormons, it's an evangelical faith, an intensely, incredibly effectively evangelical faith. This is not like a hide your light under the bushel kind of faith.
Right. I have a feeling we'd probably be talking about this again tomorrow, and so will a lot of other people. Any other headlines today that caught your eye? Things that were moving to social media.
I think the war between the old and new media, and I think the way in which old institutions react to social media was really on display today when an editor at Yahoo was caught on a live stream saying what he said and what sounds to me like just like a really dumb joke.
Right. Which he's apologized for.
Which he has apologized for, but Yahoo fired him like that, like a respected, skilled guy who'd been building their political unit. I think, people were attacking them on Twitter. So, it was remarkable how fast they moved.
Yeah. There was also another story involving the media that sort of transpired overnight. I guess a couple of delegates, or maybe they were alternate delegates, were tossed out. Yeah.
Were allegedly or reportedly throwing peanuts and saying potentially racist things to a CNN cameraman, but turn the camera on. There's the one thing in this whole building that was not filmed. It's so weird. And as CNN,
and so we know
CNN
actually very little about it. Yeah.
And because the convention was just we threw them out. They're terrible. There's nobody's contesting it. We don't know their names, so nobody's confirming or denying it. And shockingly, there's no footage. If you're a cameraman, please, if any cameraman here ever has anybody screaming racist taunts at them, please turn on the camera. I think that was the lesson of that.
So let's turn to tonight. I got one question. We saw John McCain back on the stage. Did you see any reaction to his speech?
I think Republicans maybe like him better now than they did in 08.
That always is the case, right?
Right.
Yeah.
In a weird way, he's got this real edge to his critiques of Obama's national security policy that's very clear now. That, particularly he's just very upset about leaks and. The crowd, went with that.
They like that, yeah.
Yep.
How do you feel about his, I don't know that there's a great affection that McCain has felt for Romney over the years. I'm not sure. I saw a lot of it.
Vote for my friend Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
He did not. It was not his most passionate line.
Yeah, you didn't feel that. Okay, so Paul Ryan. he's actually been somewhat of a figure of fascination in social media. You and I did a segment, I don't know, a few weeks ago, we talked about some of the memes that were floating around him, much of them having to do with his appearance. So anyway, let's, before we turn to what our readers were saying, how do you sort of feel like the view of him has been shaped in social media?
I mean, one thing that I think is that he's still not like an incredibly well-known American brand. You know, I mean, I do think like Americans are not in massive numbers following this stuff and diving in quite yet. So I think like, Medicare, ultra-conservative on Medicare is one thing, like, kind of hot for a politician is clearly another, young for a politician, but I still think this stuff is very much being kind of fought out and formed. There was I do think in terms of kind of penetrating the pop culture, like his physical fitness seems to be the thing that's gotten to, and like a shockingly high percentage of these tweets, I'm just looking at some of them on the screen now, are about his physical appearance. We've got undeniably easy on the eyes. Bad man, nice to look at, seems to be the liberal view.
Right.
So
But you don't get a sense that they feel like they have a firm take on.
Like that is literally very superficial.
Right. They know him as a conservative. They know him as very much of a physical conservative.
I think conservatives. Here's Larry Kelly. Attacks me on Twitter a lot. God bless him. He's smarter than Biden even when drunk. And I do think that's kind of for conservatives. They think they know him. They like how smart he is.
Yeah. All right. Well, while you're looking at your screen, I am going to just read through a few of these that have been handed to me. Okay, my favorite is by somebody who calls himself Action Jackson.
All right.
And I don't know how he got all of these characters in a tweet, but he got a lot. 6 words: energetic, compelling, conservative, persuasive, passionate, and personable. Certainly someone who likes him. But again, a lot of physical characteristics. We put together a bunch of these, and listen, if you're having trouble hearing me, it's only because there's a very loud band in the background.
There.
Okay, so we heard about slender, hairline, abtastic.
Abtastic.
Okay.
This is like literally superficial.
Really, wingman.
That's what the word means.
Fitness.
Wingman.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. I'm not sure. Well, Romney's wingman, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Someone said he wears his clothes too big.
Well, this was a big topic. I think BuzzFeed broke this important story, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're that tall and fit, and you buy domestic clothes at a pair of retail, according to Amy Odell, our fashion writer, and then I think you guys also had a piece. It's very,
I think we did,
very hard to find clothes that fit. But he has this very style and spokesman, Michael Steele, who tells me he's kind of working on that, and actually he's been wearing these very tight shirts he pops
That's
out of lately.
Yeah. Well, here's one that seems to counter the superficiality.
Yep.
Someone named Don tweeted, "There's more than meets the eye." Okay, and that's six words. That works out. James Pindell offered only one word, and that was intense, which I guess could be read either way, but probably is a pretty good one.
For sure.
Got any others?
I think certainly a lot of attacks on him from liberals. The cheap sellout with pernicious self-delusions. Any 6 negative words you can find. And that's one of the things about politics, right, in America right now, is that anybody who's put on the stage that way immediately becomes this intensely polarizing figure.
Right.
40% of the country is going to hate them. And there's no way around that.
Yeah. Well, that actually brings me to maybe this will be the last thing we talked about. We touched on this a little bit last night when we were together. It's just the degree to which Twitter, in particular, is dominated. I know a lot of people feel like it is dominated by liberals or people who are more to the left of the political spectrum, but I don't know that you believe that.
Numerically, that may be true, but there's this small and vocal cadre of folks who are organized to some degree around Breitbart and Andrew Breitbart's kind of legacy. But I think for him, it was often a kind of high concept joke, and they're not in on the joke at all. But who just are kind of working the media and attacking reporters all the time. And I do think reporters sometimes get really kind of freaked
Right,
out by that
right.
and have a sense that that's a really like vast and important group.
You know, I also know that if you talk to the folks at Twitter,
Yeah.
they will insist, right? They will insist that their users are really split down the middle. And I know that they will also talk that a lot of people on the right, a lot of religious conservatives, you know, really like to use Twitter. They communicate within their churches, and it's become a very powerful medium for them as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of these things that like gets very popular in subcultures, right? Like reporters are
Yeah.
all over it.
Yeah.
There's certain like African American kids in cities like are huge Twitter users. Not talking about politics at all necessarily, but it's one of those things that like it's sort of siloed and it's kind of can become very narrow.
Right.
And
So
very, very deep.
if you're in that silo, that's pretty much what you're going to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I hear behind me Tim Pawlenty has taken the stage. Big
my
draw.
God, guys.
Okay, we're going to have to watch
gotta
this.
cut this thing off
We will
right
cut
away.
this thing off. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Take a look at what's going on behind us. I want to thank Ben. We're going to do this again, I hope, tomorrow.
Always a pleasure,
And enjoy. Thanks a lot, everybody.
One bad decision follows another. It's hard to say exactly just what his worst mistake has been. There's so many to choose from. The stimulus, his energy policy, Obamacare, taxes, Joe Biden. Now, I hear Joe's particularly interested in tonight's proceedings. He even thought about coming here to Tampa, and he's taking notes. Because when Paul Ryan speaks, Joe will finally get to hear what a real vice president sounds like. But you know, President Obama isn't as bad as people say. He's actually worse. The president takes more vacations than that guy on the bizarre food show. And I'll give Barack Obama credit for creating jobs these last 4 years. For golf caddies.
How are you?
Actually, Barack Obama is the first president to create more excuses than jobs. In his view, it's Georgia's fault. It's the bank's fault. It's Europe's fault. It's the weather's fault. It's Congress's fault. Mr. President, if you want to find fault, I suggest you look in the mirror. I've come to realize that Barack Obama is the tattoo president. Like a big tattoo, it seemed cool when we were young. But later on, that decision doesn't look so good. And you wonder, what was I thinking? But the worst part is, you're going to have to explain it to your kids. Next week, Barack Obama will plead with America to give his failed policies and ideas another chance. He's asking Americans to give him more time and more money. Well, sorry, Mr. President, but you're out of time and we're out of money. Barack Obama's failed us. But look, it's understandable. A lot of people fail at their first job. Now, our opponents claim to be the party of the middle class, but Democrats don't understand this fundamental point. It's really hard for people to be part of the middle class if they don't have a job. Now, I know a bit about these things. I grew up in a meatpacking town. For much of his life, my dad was a truck driver. My mom was a homemaker. She died when I was 16 years old. And my dad lost his job not long after that. I was the only one of 5 kids in our family who had a chance to go to college. When I traveled the country these past few years, I met Americans from all different walks of life. If you ask middle-class Americans about their hopes and their dreams, they'll share their heart, but also their concerns. Can they pay the mortgage? Will they have enough money to buy groceries or put gas in the car? Will they be able to get their kids into college or pay the tuition? But jobs don't come from politicians. They come from the entrepreneurs, the inventors, the innovators, and the risk takers. America's entrepreneurs know taxes are too high and regulations are too costly and complex. Obamacare frightens them, and they want more American energy. And they're collectively making one common plea. They're saying, I want to grow my business and employ people, but they're also saying this: just get the government off my back. We need to let them know that help's on the way, and help's name is Mitt Romney. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the best candidate. This isn't his first job or the first time he's been a leader who's produced results. He's made a success of failing companies. He made a success of the Olympics. He even made government in Massachusetts more effective and efficient. And now he's ready to help get America back on track and Americans back to work. He has a plan to strengthen and grow America's middle class with lower taxes, a government that works for the American people instead of dashing their hopes and dreams, lowering energy prices, and greater access to quality education for all. But there's one other thing that I want to leave you with tonight. It's important for America to know that Mitt Romney is not only a great leader, he's also a remarkable person. He's smart, gracious, and wise. And he has this infectious good cheer about him, something I appreciate and something America needs. Mitt Romney never quits moving. When he sees a problem, he goes after it and finds the solution. It's that can-do spirit, combined with a lifetime of service and success, that convinced me to support him. And it's that can-do spirit that we need in the White House leading America now. As a former governor, I know that leadership takes optimism, but not blind optimism. We need a leader who understands the depth of our challenges, but who also doesn't shy away from them. Mitt Romney knows what our problems are, and he has the tools and the experience and the energy and the right policies to fix them. After 4 years of this president, we need Mitt Romney now more than ever. I'm proud to be supporting him for President of the United States, and I know you are too. And with any luck, in a few months, Barack Obama
will at last get some experience in the private sector. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America. Good night.
Please give a warm welcome to Arkansas's own Governor Mike Huckabee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was so very honored to be asked to address one of this week's themes, We Can Do Better. And then I was backstage and I heard some folks say that after hearing me speak, the delegates are going to say, we sure can do better than Huckabee. And that's when they will unanimously nominate Mitt Romney to be the next president of the United States of America. I want to say that Tampa has been a wonderful and hospitable city, and I'm grateful for all that they've done for us. But the only hitch in an otherwise perfect week was the awful noise coming from the hotel room next door to mine. Turns out it was just Debbie Wasserman Schultz practicing her speech for the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte next week. Bless her heart. 4 years ago, Mitt Romney and I were opponents. We still are. But we're not opposing each other. No, we are mutual opponents of the miserably failed experiments that have put this country in a downward spiral. The United States of America was originally an experiment, but it was an experiment in recognizing God-given individual liberty and creating a government in which no one is deemed better than another, and in which all of us are equal. Not equal in abilities, but equal in intrinsic worth and value. It is the essence, not just of who we are, but what we are. Now, let me just say to those who question how once rivals can be now united, it's quite simple. We have Barack Obama to thank. It was Barack Obama who said, "You didn't build it." Translation, it doesn't belong to you. Well, no small differences among us in our party approximate the vast differences between the liberty-limiting, radical left-wing, anti-business, reckless spending, tax-hiking party of Barack Obama, Harry Reid, and Nancy Pelosi versus an energized America who knows we can do better. For 4 years, we've given a chance to a man with very limited experience in governing, no experience in business whatsoever, and since taking office, mostly interested in campaigning, blaming, and aiming excuses at his predecessor, the Republicans, and people in business, or as Republicans like to call them, employers. We've stagnated into an economy that has taken all that hope right down the slope and has left millions without jobs, forced out of their homes by foreclosure, herded into dependency upon a government that promises us candy but gives us cavities. Barack Obama seems intent on enrolling more people on food stamps. Mitt Romney's focus is going to be on generating more jobs that will make food stamps unnecessary for them. We know full well we can do better. Mitt Romney turned around companies that were on the skids. He turned around a scandal-ridden Olympics that was deep in the red into a high point of profit and patriotic pride. And he turned around a very liberal state when he erased a deficit and replaced it with a surplus. Do you remember when Barack Obama said that if he couldn't turn things around in 3 years, it'd be a one-term proposition? Well, it's been almost 4 years. I say let's make him a proposition he can't refuse. Let's vote him out. I understand that the job of president is admittedly tougher than running a company, an Olympic contest, or a Commonwealth. But when one sees what even Bill Clinton noted was a sterling record of problem solving that has marked the life of Mitt Romney, we are confident that we will do better. I am thrilled to say Mitt Romney has been loyal to his lovely wife, who knocked it out of the park last night in this arena. He's been loyal to his sons, to his country, to his employees, and to his church. Well, I'm sure now that the press is going to tell you he isn't perfect. But my friends, for the past 4 years, we've tried the one that the press thought was perfect, and that hasn't worked out all that well for us. That's why tonight I tell you, we can do better. Our founding fathers left taxation and tyranny, seeking religious liberty and a society of meritocracy rather than aristocracy. What they created was a bold experiment in government, believing that God gave us unalienable rights, and that the role of government is simply to make sure that those rights are protected. So fearful were they that the government would grow beyond their intention, that even after crafting our magnificent Constitution, they said, we can do even better. They added amendments. We call them the Bill of Rights. Those Bill of Rights limit what the government can do, and they guarantee what we, the people, have the unimpeded right to do, whether to speak, assemble, worship, pray, publish, or even refuse intrusions into our homes. Many of those founders died to pass on that heritage. They had lived under the boot of big government, and what they said was, we can do better. As a kid growing up in a household, my dad never finished high school. I grew up in a family in which no male upstream from me had ever finished high school, much less gone to college. But I was taught that even though there was nothing I could do about what was behind me, I could change everything about what was in front of me. My working poor parents told me that I could do better. They taught me I was as good as anybody else. And it never occurred to them to tell me that I could just rest comfortably and wait for good old Uncle Sugar to feed me, lead me, and then bleed me. They told me to get off my backside, work hard, take risks, and treat people honestly and honorably. And look at me today. I've become, as the press like to label me, a failed candidate. Oh, it's true, I have fallen from the high perch of politics, and now I wallow in the mud of the media. But I still know that as a country, we can do better. And with Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, we will do better. I want to clear the air about something that has been said. People wonder whether guys like me, an evangelical, would only support a fellow evangelical. Well, my friends, I want to tell you something. Of the 4 people on the 2 tickets, the only self-professed evangelical is Barack Obama. And he supports changing the definition of marriage, believes that human life is disposable and expendable at any time in the womb, even beyond the womb. And he tells people of faith that they have to bow their knees to the God of government and violate their faith and conscience in order to comply with what he calls health care. Friends, I know we can do better. let me say it as clearly as possible that the attack on my Catholic brothers and sisters is an attack on me. The Democrats have brought back that old dance, the limbo, to see how low they can go in attempting to limit our ability to practice our faith. But this isn't a battle about contraceptives and Catholics, but about conscience and the Creator. Let me say to you tonight, I care far less as to where Mitt Romney takes his family to church than I do about where he takes this country. Joe Biden said, "Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value." Well, in the Senate, Joe's party hasn't produced a budget in 3 years. What does that say about their values? And by the way, speaking of budgets, Joe Biden's budget shows that while he wants to be very generous with your money through higher taxes and government spending, for years he gave less than 0.2% of his own money to charity. He just wants you to give the government more so he and the Democrats can feel better about themselves. Mitt Romney has given over 16% of his income to church and charity. And my friend, I feel a lot better about having a president who will give generously of his own money instead of mine or yours. My concern is not Barack Obama's past, but my concern is for the future. Not his future, but for the future of my grandchildren, little Chandler and Scarlett. And under this president, we have burdened each of them with tens of thousands of dollars of debt and a system that will collapse upon itself because he thinks that we can prosper by punishing productivity and rewarding reckless irresponsibility. The Democrats say we ought to give Barack Obama credit for trying. Folks, that sounds like the nonsense of giving every kid a trophy for showing up. Let's be clear. We're talking about leading the country, not playing on a third-grade soccer team. Look, I realize this is a man who got a Nobel Peace Prize for what he would potentially do. But in the real world, you get the prize for producing something, not just promising something. Sometimes we get so close to the picture, we really can't see it clearly. I've had the privilege of working with Bono for the past few years in the One campaign to fight AIDS and hunger and disease around the world. Bono is an Irishman and a great humanitarian. And I remember him telling me of his admiration for America. He said, America's more than just a country. We're an idea. And he reminded me that we are an exceptional nation with an extraordinary history who owes it to the generations who are coming after us to leave them with an extraordinary legacy. But if we don't change the direction of our nation now, our bequest will be nothing but an extraordinary shame. But, dear friends, we can do better. President Obama is out of gas, and Americans are out of patience, and our great republic is almost out of time. It's time that we no longer lead from behind, but that we get off our behinds and leave something lasting for those who came after us instead of a mountain of debt and a pile of excuses. Tonight, it's not because we're Republicans, it's because we are Americans that we proudly stand with Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, and we say, we will do better. God bless you. Thank you. God bless.
Like a fool, I went to stay too long. Now I'm wondering if your love's still strong. Ooh, baby, here I am, signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours. Then that time I went and said goodbye. Now I'm back and not ashamed to cry. Ooh, baby, here I am, signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours. Here I am, baby. Oh, signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours. See, here I am, baby. Signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the former U.S. Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, distinguished delegates. Good evening, fellow Republicans. Good evening, my fellow Americans. We gather here at a time of significance and challenge. This young century has been a difficult one. I can remember as if it were yesterday when my young assistant came into my office at the White House to say that a plane had hit the World Trade Center, and then a second plane, and then a third plane, the Pentagon. And later we would learn that a plane had crashed into a field in Pennsylvania, driven into the ground by brave souls who died so that others might live. From that day on, our sense of vulnerability and our concepts of security were never the same again. Then in 2008, the global financial and economic crisis would stun us. And it still reverberates as we deal with unemployment and economic uncertainty and bad policies that cast a pall over an American economy and recovery that is desperately needed at home and abroad. And we have seen that the desire for liberty and freedom is indeed universal as men and women in the Middle East rise up to seize it. Yet the promise of the Arab Spring is engulfed in uncertainty. Internal strife and hostile neighbors are challenging the young, fragile democracy of Iraq. Dictators in Iran and Syria butcher their people and threaten regional security. Russia and China prevent a response. And everyone asks, where does America stand? Indeed, that is the question of the hour. Where does America stand? You see, when friends or foes alike don't know the answer to that question unambiguously and clearly, the world is likely to be a more dangerous and chaotic place. Since World War II, the United States has had an answer to that question. We stand for free peoples and free markets. We will defend and support them. We will sustain a balance of power that favors freedom. Now, to be sure, the burdens of leadership have been heavy. I know, as you do, the sacrifice of Americans, especially the sacrifice of many of our bravest in the ultimate sacrifice. But our armed forces are the sure shield and foundation of liberty, and we are so fortunate that we have men and women in uniform who volunteer. They volunteer to defend us at the front lines of freedom, and we owe them our eternal gratitude. I know, too, that it has not always been easy, though it has been rewarding, to speak for those who would otherwise not have a voice. The religious dissident in China, the democracy advocate in Venezuela, the political prisoner in Iran. It has been hard to muster the resources to support fledgling democracies and to intervene on behalf of the most desperate. The AIDS orphan in Uganda, the refugee fleeing Zimbabwe, the young woman who has been trafficked into the sex trade in Southeast Asia. It has been hard. Yet this assistance, together with the compassionate work of private charities, people of conscience and people of faith, has shown the soul of our country. And I know too, that there is a weariness. I know that it feels as if we have carried these burdens long enough. But we can only know that there is no choice, because one of two things will happen if we don't lead. Either no one will lead and there will be chaos, or someone will fill the vacuum who does not share our values. My fellow Americans, we do not have a choice. We cannot be reluctant to lead, and you cannot lead from behind. Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan understand this reality. Our well-being at home and our leadership abroad are inextricably linked. They know what to do. They know that our friends and allies must again be able to trust us. From Israel to Colombia, from Poland to the Philippines, our allies and friends have to know that we will be reliable and consistent and determined. And our foes can have no reason to doubt our resolve, because peace really does come through strength. Our military capability and our technological advantage will be safe in Mitt Romney's hands. We must work for an open global economy and pursue free and fair trade to grow our exports and our influence abroad. If you are worried about the rise of China, just consider this. The United States has ratified only 3 trade agreements in the last few years, and those were negotiated in the Bush administration. China has signed 15 free trade agreements and is in the progress of negotiating as many as 18 more. Sadly, we are abandoning the field of free and fair trade, and it will come back to haunt us. We must not allow the chance to attain energy independence to slip from our grasp. We are blessed with the gift of oil and gas resources here in North America, and we must develop them. We can develop them sensitively, we can develop them securing our environment, but we must develop them. ingenuity to develop alternative sources of energy too. But most importantly, Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan will rebuild the foundation of our strength, the American economy, stimulating private sector growth and stimulating small business entrepreneurship. When the world looks at us today, they see an American government that cannot live within its means. They see an American government that continues to borrow money that will mortgage the future of generations to come. The world knows that when a nation loses control of its finances, it eventually loses control of its destiny. That is not the America that has inspired people to follow our lead. After all, when the world looks to America, they look to us because we are the most successful economic and political experiment in human history. That is the true basis of American exceptionalism. You see, the essence of America, what really unites us, is not nationality or ethnicity or religion. It is an idea. And what an idea it is. That you can come from humble circumstances and you can do great things. That it does not matter where you came from, it matters where you are going. Ours has never been a narrative of grievance and entitlement. We have never believed that I am doing poorly because you are doing well. We have never been another and never envious of each other's successes. No, ours has been a belief in opportunity, and it has been a constant struggle, long and hard, up and down, to try to extend the benefits of the American dream to all. But that American ideal is indeed endangered today. There is no country, no, not even a rising China, that can do more harm to us than we can do to ourselves if we do not do the hard work before us here at home. More than at any other time in history, greatness is built on mobilizing human potential and ambition. We have always done that better than any country in the world. People have come here from all over because they have believed our creed of opportunity and limitless horizons. They have come here from the world's most impoverished nations just to make a decent wage. And they have come here from advanced societies as engineers and scientists to fuel the knowledge-based revolution in the Silicon Valley of California, in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, along Route 128 in Massachusetts, in Austin, Texas, and across this great land. Continue to welcome the world's most ambitious people to be a part of us. In that way, we stay young and optimistic and determined. We need immigration laws that protect our borders, meet our economic needs, and yet show that we are a compassionate nation of immigrants. Been successful too because Americans have known that one's status at birth is not a permanent condition. Americans have believed that you might not be able to control your circumstances, but you can control your response to your circumstances. And your greatest ally in controlling your response to your circumstances has been a quality education. But today, when I can look at your zip code and I can tell whether you're going to get a good education, can I honestly say it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. The crisis in K-12 education is a threat to the very fabric of who we are. My mom was a teacher. I respect the profession. We need great teachers, not poor ones and not mediocre ones. We have to have high standards for our kids because self-esteem comes from achievement, not from lax standards and false praise. And we need to give parents greater choice, particularly poor parents whose kids, very often minorities, are trapped in failing neighborhood schools. This is the civil rights issue of our day. If we do anything less, we condemn generations to joblessness and hopelessness and life on the government dole. If we do anything less, we will endanger our global imperatives for competitiveness. And if we do anything less, we will tear apart the fabric of who we are and cement the turn toward entitlement and grievance. Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan will rebuild us at home, and they will help us lead abroad. They will provide an answer to the question, where does America stand? The challenge is real, and the times are hard. But America has met and overcome hard challenges before. Whenever you find yourself doubting us, just think about all those times that America made the impossible seem inevitable in retrospect. Our revolutionary founding against the greatest military power of the time, a civil war, brother against brother, hundreds of thousands dead on both sides, but we emerged a more perfect union. A second founding when impatient patriots were determined to overcome the birth defect of slavery and the scourge of segregation. A long struggle against communism with the Soviet Union eventually in collapse and Europe whole, free, and at peace. And in the aftermath of 9/11, the willingness to take really hard decisions that secured us and prevented the follow-on attack that everybody thought preordained. And on a personal note, a little girl grows up in Jim Crow, Birmingham, the segregated city of the South where her parents can't take her to a movie theater or to a restaurant. But they have her absolutely convinced that even if she can't have a hamburger at the Woolworth's lunch counter, she could be President of the United States if she wanted to be, and she becomes the Secretary of State. of making the impossible seem inevitable in retrospect, but we know it was never inevitable. It took leadership, and it took courage, and it took belief in our values. Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan have the integrity and the experience and the vision to lead us. They know who we are. They know who we want to be. They know who we are in the world and what we offer. That is why this is a moment and an election of consequence. Because it just has to be that the freest and most compassionate country on the face of the earth will continue to be the most powerful and a beacon for prosperity and liberty across the world. God bless you, and God bless this extraordinary country, this exceptional country, the United States of America.
From the state of New Mexico, the first Hispanic female governor in the history of the United States, please welcome Governor Susana Martinez.
Thank you, and good evening. Before I begin tonight, let's keep in our prayers the families impacted by the storm affecting the Gulf Coast. If you haven't done so already, please donate to the Red Cross. To find out more about how you can help those affected by Hurricane Isaac, please visit redcross.org/give. I am Susana Martinez. On behalf of the great state of New Mexico, let me express my gratitude for being invited to speak tonight. Growing up, I never imagined a little girl from a border town could one day become a governor. But this is America. Y en América, todo es posible. My parents taught me to never give up and to always believe that my future could be whatever I dreamt it to be. Success, they taught me, is built on the foundation of courage, hard work, and individual responsibility. Despite what some would have us believe, success is not built on resentment and fear. We grew up on the border and truly lived paycheck to paycheck. My dad was a Golden Gloves boxer in the Marine Corps, then a deputy sheriff. My mom worked as an office assistant. One day, they decided to start a security guard business. I thought they were absolutely crazy. We literally had no savings. But they always believed in the American dream. So, my dad worked to grow the business. My mom did the books at night. And at 18, I guarded the parking lot at the Catholic Church bingos. Now, my dad made sure I could take care of myself. I carried a Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum. Yes, that gun weighed more than I did. My parents grew that small business from one 18-year-old guarding a bingo to more than 125 employees in 3 states. And sure, there was help along the way, but my parents took the risk. They stood up, and you better believe they built it. My parents also taught me about having the courage to stand for something. So I went to law school and I became a prosecutor. I took on a specialty that very few choose to pursue. I prosecuted child abuse and child homicide cases. Cases that were truly gut-wrenching. But standing up for those kids, being their voice for justice, was the honor of a lifetime. Sometimes you pay a price for standing up. When I was a young prosecutor, I got called to testify against my boss. I could have backed down, but I didn't. I stood up to him, and he fired me for it. So I took him on, ran against him for district attorney, and beat him by a landslide. I fear some of our leaders today have lost the courage to stand up. What we have now are politicians. They won't offer real plans and only stand up when they want to blame someone else. And I don't say that just because a Democrat is in the White House. I was a Democrat for many years. So were my parents. Before I ran for district attorney, 2 Republicans invited my husband and me to lunch. And I knew a party switch was exactly what they wanted. So I told Chuck, we'll be polite, enjoy a free lunch, and then say goodbye. But we talked about issues. They never used the words Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. We talked about many issues, like welfare. Is it a way of life or a hand up? Talked about size of government. How much should it tax families and small businesses? And when we left that lunch, we got in the car, and I looked over at Chuck and said, I'll be damned. We're Republicans. This election should not be about political parties. Too many Americans are out of work, and our debt is out of control. This election needs to be about those issues, and it is the responsibility of both parties to offer up real solutions and have an honest debate. In New Mexico, I inherited the largest structural deficit in state history, and our legislature is controlled by Democrats. We don't always agree, but we came together in a bipartisan manner and turned that deficit into a surplus. And we did it without raising taxes. But that's not the kind of leadership that we're seeing from President Obama. He promised to bring us all together, to cut unemployment, to pass immigration reform in his first year, and even promised to cut the deficit in half in his first term. Do you remember that? But he hasn't come close. They haven't even passed a budget in Washington, D.C. in 3 years. If he can take credit for government building small businesses, then he can accept responsibility for breaking his promise and adding $5 trillion to the national debt. Because he did build that. As the first Hispanic female governor in the history, little girls, they often come up to me in the grocery store or in the mall. They look and they point, and when they get the courage to come up, they ask, "Are you Susanna?" And they run up and they give me a hug. And I wonder, how do you know who I am? But they do. And these are little girls. It's in moments like these when I'm reminded that we each pave a path. And for me, it's about paving a path for those little girls to follow. They need to know no more barriers. In many ways, Mitt Romney and I are very different. Different starts in life, different paths to leadership, different cultures. But we've each shared in the promise of America. And we share a core belief that the promise of America must be kept for the next generation. El sueño americano es tener éxito. It's success. It is success, and success is the American dream. And that success is not something to be ashamed of or to demonize. There is one candidate in this election who will protect that dream. One leader who will fight hard to keep the promise of America for the next generation. And that's why we must stand up and make Mitt Romney the next president of the United States.
Today, we take another step forward in helping restore the promise of America. His leadership begins with character and values. He's a person of great steadiness, whose integrity is unquestioned and whose word is good. He understands the fiscal challenges facing America and the fiscal catastrophe that awaits us if we don't change course. Today's a good day for America, and there are better days ahead.
When I look at all he's done, his life, his wife, his family, I'm just so proud. I know his father would be as well, especially tonight.
I am so proud to introduce my husband, the next Vice President of the United States, Paul Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey, Wisconsin. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are great. Thanks so much. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, delegates, and fellow citizens, I am honored by the support of this convention for Vice President of the United States. I accept the duty to help lead our nation out of a jobs crisis and back to prosperity. And I know we can do this. I accept the calling of my generation to give our children the America that was given to us, with opportunity for the young and security for the old. And I know that we are ready. Our nominee is sure ready. His whole life
His whole life prepared him for this moment, to meet serious challenges in a serious way, without excuses and idle words. After 4 years of getting the runaround, America needs a turnaround, and the man for the job is Governor Mitt Romney. I'm the newcomer to this campaign, so let me share a first impression. I have never seen opponents so silent about their record and so desperate to keep their power. They've run out of ideas. Their moment came and went. Fear and division is all they've got left. With all their attack ads, the president is just throwing away money. And he's pretty experienced at that. You see, some people can't be dragged down by the usual cheap tactics because their character, ability, and plain decency are so obvious. And ladies and gentlemen, that is Mitt Romney. For my part, your nomination is an unexpected turn. It certainly came as news to my family. And I'd like you to meet them. My best friend and wife, Jana, our daughter, Liza, and our boys, Charlie and Sam. The kids are happy to see their grandma, who lives in Florida. There she is, my mom, Betty. My dad, a small-town lawyer, was also named Paul. Until we lost him when I was 16, he was a gentle presence in my life. I'd like to think he'd be proud of me and my sister and brothers. You know what? I'm sure proud of him and where I come from, Janesville, Wisconsin. I live on the same block where I grew up. We belong to the same parish where I was baptized. Janesville is that kind of place. The people of Wisconsin have been good to me. I've tried to live up to their trust. And now, I ask those hardworking men and women and millions like them across America to join our cause and get this country working again. When Governor Romney asked me to join the ticket, I said, let's get this done. And that is exactly what we are going to do. President Barack Obama came to office during an economic crisis, as he has reminded us a time or two. Those are very tough days. And any fair measure of his record has to take that into account. My home state voted for President Obama. When he talked about change, many people liked the sound of it, especially in Janesville, where we were about to lose a major factory. A lot of guys I went to high school with worked at that GM plant. Right there at that plant, candidate Obama said, I believe that if our government is there to support you, this plant will be here for another 100 years. That's what he said in 2008. Well, as it turned out, That plant didn't last another year. It is locked up and empty to this day. And that's how it is in so many towns, where the recovery that was promised is nowhere in sight. Right now, 23 million men and women are struggling to find work. 23 million people, unemployed or underemployed. Nearly 1 in 6 Americans is in poverty. Millions of young Americans have graduated from college during the Obama presidency, ready to use their gifts and get moving in life. Half of them can't find the work they studied for or any work at all. So here's the question. Without a change in leadership, why would the next 4 years be any different from the last 4 years? The first troubling sign came with the stimulus. It was President Obama's first and best shot at fixing the economy, at a time when he got everything he wanted under one-party rule. It cost $831 billion, the largest one-time expenditure ever by our federal government. It went to companies like Solyndra, with their gold-plated connections, subsidized jobs, and make-believe markets. The stimulus was a case of political patronage, corporate welfare, and cronyism at their worst. You, the American people of this country, were cut out of the deal. What did taxpayers get out of the Obama stimulus? More debt. That money wasn't just spent and wasted. It was borrowed, spent, and wasted. Maybe the greatest waste of all was time. Here we were, faced with a massive job crisis, so deep that if everyone out of work stood in single file, that unemployment line would stretch the length of the entire American continent. You would think that any president, whatever his party, would make job creation and nothing else his first order of economic business. But this president didn't do that. Instead, we got a long, divisive, all-or-nothing attempt to put the federal government in charge of health care. Obamacare comes to more than 2,000 pages of rules, mandates, taxes, fees, and fines that have no place in a free country. That's right. That's right. You know what? The president has declared that the debate over government-controlled health care is over. That will come as news to the millions of Americans who will elect Mitt Romney so we can repeal Obamacare. And the biggest, coldest power play of all in Obamacare came at the expense of the elderly. You see, even with all the hidden taxes to pay for the health care takeover, even with the new law and new taxes on nearly 1 million small businesses, the planners in Washington still didn't have enough money. They needed more. They needed hundreds of billions more. So they just took it all away from Medicare. $716 billion funneled out of Medicare by President Obama. An obligation we have to our parents and grandparents is being sacrificed, all to pay for a new entitlement we didn't even ask for. The greatest threat to Medicare is Obamacare, and we're going to stop it. In Congress, when they take out the heavy books and the wall charts about Medicare, my thoughts go back to a house on Garfield Street in Janesville. My wonderful grandma, Janet, had Alzheimer's, and she moved in with Mom and me. Though she felt lost at times, we did all the little things that made her feel loved. We had help from Medicare, and it was there, just like it's there for my mom today. Medicare is a promise, and we will honor it. A Romney-Ryan administration will protect and strengthen Medicare for my mom's generation, for my generation, and for my kids and yours. So our opponents can consider themselves on notice. In this election, on this issue, the usual posturing on the left isn't going to work. Mitt Romney and I know the difference between protecting a program and raiding it. Ladies and gentlemen, our nation needs this debate. We want this debate. We will win this debate. Obamacare, as much as anything else, explains why a presidency that began with such anticipation now comes to such a disappointing close. It began with a financial crisis. It ends with a job crisis. It began with a housing crisis they alone didn't cause. It ends with a housing crisis they didn't correct. It began with a perfect AAA credit rating for the United States. It ends with a downgraded America. It all started off with stirring speeches, Greek columns, the thrill of something new. Now, all that's left is a presidency adrift, surviving on slogans that already seem tired, grasping at a moment that has already passed, like a ship trying to sail on yesterday's wind. You know, President Obama was asked not long ago to reflect on any mistakes he might have made. He said, well, I haven't communicated enough. He said his job is to, quote, tell a story to the American people. As if that's the whole problem here? He needs to talk more, and we need to be better listeners? Ladies and gentlemen, these past 4 years, we have suffered no shortage of words in the White House. What is missing is leadership in the White House.
Right.
And the story that Barack Obama does tell, forever shifting blame to the last administration, is getting old. The man assumed office almost 4 years ago. Isn't it about time he assumed responsibility? In this generation, a defining responsibility of government is to steer our nation clear of a debt crisis while there is still time. Back in 2008, candidate Obama called a $10 trillion national debt unpatriotic. Serious talk from what looked like a serious reformer. Yet by his own decisions, President Obama has added more debt than any other president before him, and more than all the troubled governments of Europe combined. One president, one term, $5 trillion in new debt. He created a new bipartisan debt commission. They came back with an urgent report. He thanked them, sent them on their way, and then did exactly nothing. Republicans stepped up with good faith reforms and solutions equal to the problems. How did the president respond? By doing nothing. Nothing except to dodge and demagogue the issue. So here we are, $16 trillion in debt, and still he does nothing. In Europe, massive debts have put entire governments at risk of collapse, and still he does nothing. And all we have heard from this president and his team are attacks on anyone who dares to point out the obvious. They have no answer to this simple reality. We need to stop spending money we don't have. Really simple. Not that hard. My dad used to say to me, "Son, you have a choice. You can be part of the problem, or you can be part of the solution." The President administration has made its choices, and Mitt Romney and I have made ours. Before the math and the momentum overwhelm us all, we are going to solve this nation's economic problems. And I'm going to level with you. We don't have that much time. But if we are serious and smart and we lead, we can do this. After 4 years of government trying to divide up the wealth, we will get America creating wealth again. With tax fairness and regulatory reform, we'll put government back on the side of men and women who create jobs. And the men and women who need jobs. My mom started a small business, and I've seen what it takes. Mom was 50 when my dad died. She got on a bus every weekday for years and rode 40 miles each morning to Madison. She earned a new degree and learned new skills to start her small business. It wasn't just a new livelihood. It was a new life. And it transformed my mom from a widow in grief to a small businesswoman whose happiness wasn't just in the past. Her work gave her hope It made our family proud. And to this day, my mom is my role model. Behind every small business, there's a story worth knowing. All the corner shops in our towns and cities, the restaurants, cleaners, gyms, hair salons, hardware stores, these didn't come out of nowhere. A lot of heart goes into each one. And if small business people say they made it on their own, all they're saying is that nobody else worked 7 days a week in their place. Nobody showed up in their place to open the door at 5 in the morning. Nobody did their thinking and worrying and sweating for them. After all that work, and in a bad economy, it sure doesn't help to hear from their president that government gets the credit. What they deserve to hear is the truth. Yes, you did build that. We have a plan for a stronger middle class with a goal of generating 12 million new jobs over the next 4 years. In a clean break from the Obama years, and frankly, from the years before this president, we will keep federal spending at 20% of GDP or less, because that is enough. The choice is whether to put hard limits on economic growth or hard limits on the size of government. And we choose to limit government. I learned a good deal about economics and about America from the author of the Reagan tax reforms, the great Jack Kemp. What gave Jack that incredible enthusiasm was his belief in the possibilities of free people, in the power of free enterprise and strong communities to overcome poverty and despair. We need that same optimism right now. And in our dealings with other nations, a Romney-Ryan administration will speak with confidence and clarity. Whenever men and women rise up for their own freedom, they will know that the American president is on their side. Instead of managing American decline, leaving allies to doubt us and adversaries to test us, we will act in the conviction that the United States is still the greatest force for peace and liberty that this world has ever known. President Obama is the kind of politician who puts promises on the record and then calls that the record. But we are 4 years into this presidency. The issue is not the economy that Barack Obama inherited, not the economy that he envisions, but this economy that we are living. College graduates should not have to live out their 20s in their childhood bedrooms. staring up at fading Obama posters and wondering when they can move out and get going with life. Everyone who feels stuck in the Obama economy is right to focus on the here and now. And I hope you understand this too. If you're feeling left out or passed by, you have not failed. Your leaders have failed you. None of us should have to settle for the best this administration offers. A dull, adventureless journey from one entitlement to the next, a government-planned life, a country where everything is free but us. Listen to the way we're already spoken to. Listen to the way we are spoken to already, as if everyone is stuck in some class or station in life, victims of circumstances beyond our control, with the government there to help us cope with our fate. It's the exact opposite of everything I learned growing up in Wisconsin or at college in Ohio. You know, when I was waiting tables, washing dishes, or mowing lawns for money, I never thought of myself as stuck in some station in life. I was on my own path, my own journey, an American journey, where I could think for myself, decide for myself, define happiness for myself. That's what we do in this country. That's the American dream. That's freedom, and I'll take it any day over the supervision and sanctimony of the central planners. By themselves, the failures of one administration are not a mandate for a new administration. A challenger must stand on his own merits. He must be ready and worthy to serve in the office of president. We're a full generation apart, Governor Romney and I, and in some ways we're different. There are the songs on his iPod, which I've heard on the campaign bus, and I've heard it on many hotel elevators. He actually urged me to play some of these songs at campaign rallies. I said, look, I hope it's not a deal breaker, Mitt, but my playlist, it starts with AC/DC and it ends with Zeppelin. Look, a generation apart, but that doesn't matter. It makes us different, but not in any of the things that matter. Mitt Romney and I both grew up in the heartland, and we know what places like Wisconsin and Michigan look like when times are good. We know what these communities look like when times are good, when people are working, when families are doing more than just getting by. And we know it can be that way again. We've had very different careers, mine mainly in public service, his mostly in the private sector. He helped start businesses and turn around failing ones. And by the way, being successful in business, that's a good thing. Mitt has not only succeeded, but he succeeded where others could not. He turned around the Olympics at a time when a great institution was collapsing under the weight of bad management, overspending, and corruption. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? He was the Republican governor of a state where almost 9 in 10 legislators are Democrats, and yet he balanced the budget without raising taxes. Unemployment went down, household incomes went up, and Massachusetts under Governor Mitt Romney saw its credit rating upgraded. Mitt and I also go to different churches. But in any church, the best kind of preaching is done by example. And I've been watching that example. The man who will accept your nomination tomorrow is prayerful and faithful and honorable. Not only a defender of marriage, he offers an example of marriage at its best. Not only a fine businessman, he's a fine man, worthy of leading this optimistic and good-hearted country. Our faiths come together in the same moral creed. We believe that in every life there is goodness. For every person there is hope. Each one of us was made for a reason, bearing the image and likeness of the Lord of life. We have responsibilities, one to another. We do not each face the world alone. And the greatest of all responsibilities is that of the strong to protect the weak. The truest measure of any society is how it treats those who cannot defend or care for themselves. Each of these moral ideas is essential to democratic government, to the rule of law, to life in a humane and decent society. They are the moral creed of our country, as powerful in our time as on the day of America's founding. They are self-evident and unchanging, and sometimes even presidents need reminding that our rights come from nature and God and not from government. The founding generation secured those rights for us, and in every generation since, the best among us have defended our freedoms. They are protecting us right now. We honor them and all of our veterans, and we thank them. The right that makes all the difference now is the right to choose our own leaders. And you are entitled to the clearest possible choice, because the time for choosing is drawing near. So here is our pledge. We will not duck the tough issues. We will lead. We will not spend the next 4 years blaming others. We will take responsibility. We will not try to replace our founding principles. We will reapply our founding principles. The work ahead will be hard. These times demand the best of all of us. All of us, but we can do this. We can do this. Together, we can do this. We can get this country working again. We can get this economy growing again. We can make the safety net safe again. We can do this. Whatever your political party, let's come together for the sake of our country. Join Mitt Romney and me. Let's give this effort everything we have. Let's see this thing all the way through. Let's get this done. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Please welcome back Chairman Priebus.